to individuals that are part-time. I don't know what that cost would be, Chris, but it's something that I would like the FAB, if it's not looking into that yet, benefits to part-timers, especially bus drivers.
Currently, bus drivers are getting benefits, and they're
Part-timers?
5 to 5.5 hours a day.
So our bus drivers with 6.5-hour contracts, a 6.5-hour bus driver is considered full-time. So they're eligible for VRS and our health insurance. Anything less than that, they're still eligible for our health insurance. They would just pay the part-time rate that we offer all of our part-time employees.
So is that a yes, that they are now getting benefits for health insurance?
Yes, if they're a 6.5-hour contracted employee, and at this rate, we're trying to move more to, as many hours as possible, obviously, but we do have some that are less than 6.5-hour contracted employees. Sometimes that's by their choice, because they would rather have a 4-hour or 5-hour day.
And for those that don't have the health insurance, is there a possibility that we're giving them, like the county is, giving them funds towards that?
We are not doing that, no ma'am.
Are there any limitations?
Is there something that, excuse me, hold on one second. Is there something that we could consider, like the FAB could consider looking into that?
We could certainly look into it. I don't think it's appropriate on the budget priorities, which we're trying to
Yeah.
keep to like 3 and
Okay.
have, but as we develop the budget, we can certainly look at it. I'm not
Yeah,
sure if we have
I
the
wasn't
funds
sure
for it, but we can
where
look
it
at it.
was and that it could fit anywhere. Thank you, FAB.
Chris, real quick, is there any state law or limitations that would prevent us from looking at that in the future if we wanted to expand it to cover what they call the part-timers?
We would just, you're talking about the reimbursement if they don't participate in health insurance?
Offering it to them and
Offering it to
having
the
us treat the part-timers as if they were full-time.
Yes and no. VRS requires us to set the hours. So for our nutrition workers and our transportation employees, we've set that as a full-time employees at 6.5 hours. That we could adjust that to, let's say, six hours, and that would make them eligible for full VRS benefits with 6 hours. There's pros and cons to that. Some drivers look at that as, you're trying to cut my hours, you're going to give me less hours. We want to get them contracted for more hours, because then they're making more on a daily basis, which gives them more VRS benefits. So we have some flexibility there. We would just have to look at it holistically.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Okay. I just wanted to ask, on our first bullet, when we have, because this will be, to me, number one, I mean, and I know is going to be a lead one, continue implementation of the multi-year strategy to draw adjustments to licensed compensation scale. I think, though, the bullets seem to also go to not just our licensed staff. I'm just trying to make sure, and you all probably debated it, so I'm not trying to bring up but I just wanted to make sure if we're leading with, that we're looking at phase 2 of adjustments to licensed compensation scale, just to make sure that there's also a broader, does that make sense?
Yes, and perhaps what we need to say is to continue to implement a competitive salary scale across all sectors, so that we're, and I can adjust that, because
While keeping the plan
Phase 2 is
that the
bullet.
supervisors asked us to come up with, that we came up with. But I think we're also, Chris, we will probably need to look and see if we're still on track, or if the fact that the state gave everybody so much money for salary that we may not be getting as far ahead as we had planned in 3 years.
I came up, but you already covered it, I think. I mentioned this in FAB, is we're pulling those scales together now from all the other school divisions as they become public, which allows us to do that comparison again. When we originally did our 3-year study or 3-year plan for our licensed employee scale adjustments, that was assuming moderate percentage increases for other school divisions. Well, the state did the 5% across the board for the school boards that wanted to participate. So we know our competitive school divisions that we lose teachers to the most did more than a 2 or 3% increase. So we need to take a look at that and really see how much we close the gap with Prince William specifically.
Quick question, I don't know where this fits, but these are the budget priorities that you just mentioned, so you open up the door about the strategic plan. So we had a strategic plan to try to get them to the, at least, base. Do we have another strategic plan to actually compete and hopefully, compete with Prince William versus Spotsylvania in terms of getting them to the mid?
So, for teachers, we looked at, Spotsylvania, Prince William, Fairfax were really the big three, with really Prince William being the goal that we compete with the most, specifically in Stafford. And so we didn't necessarily target a min or a mid. We did look at the average of those three and trying to get halfway to where Prince William is, because Spotsy is, I've said this before, you've heard it 100 times, we're barely above Spotsy. So when you take an average of Prince William and Spotsy, that's really an average of where we're at and where Prince William is at. So that was kind of our target, but it's a moving target because every year we try to do a little, they do a lot. So, if they're already $10,000 above us, their 5% is going farther than our 5% is here. And so obviously we did more than 5% for the majority of our teachers. The average, I think it was 7.6, 7.7 for our teachers. So we were able to do more than what Spotsy or what Prince William offered. But on a dollar basis, when you take the percentage of the total amount, that's what we're comparing now to get a better idea of, do we need to adjust? Last year, if you looked at that, all right, this is year where we want to be in year 2, that's probably shifted a little bit to try to close that ground.
Ms. Healy?
Last year, our priority was to develop a multi-year funding strategy, and this year it's to continue implementation. Is this multi-year funding strategy in writing somewhere that we could,
This is
focus on?
what was part of the budget, and we said we were going to phase it in over 3 years. It was just in discussions. I don't know if it was specifically written.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. I mean, if we develop this multi-year funding strategy, I'm assuming it's written down somewhere, this strategy, because we developed it the year that just passed, and now we're saying we're gonna continue the implementation. So I'd like to, be able to review that multi-year funding strategy and make that available to the public so that they see, where we're going down the road. So do we?
My recollection,
document?
my recollection was we were shown the salary scale and how each year, how much of an increase to get, to move from a 39-year scale to a 30-year scale. Am I?
Yeah.
But before we do that, may address the salary scales, but this says our priority was to develop a funding strategy to address division needs and anticipated growth challenges, which is broader than the teacher scale. So if we have in fact developed that multi-year funding strategy, we should be able to make it available, particularly since we now say we're going to continue it.
So so to develop the funding strategy is really a joint effort with the Board of Supervisors. We developed what the strategy was to try to have a more competitive licensed teacher scale. And so we had a 3-year strategy to complete that, but obviously that requires funding, whether it's state or local funds. But as we saw this past year, as we receive state funds, that generally means the other school divisions are receiving that same incentive that we're competing with. So we developed the expenditure strategy. What the strategy was over 3 years, roughly, between $10 and $11 million a year to try to get our teachers where we want at the end of 3 years. That number has changed now, as I've already alluded to. But the funding piece of that's where we have to work with the Board of Supervisors to develop that funding strategy.
Okay, so this multi-year
So-
funding strategy is limited to teacher salaries.
So
I'm just asking
okay.
whoever, I don't know who is the responsible party here. Is it Dr. Warner? Then you have the answer?
So to address the multi-year funding strategy, we're going to focus on the PPE, which is how we get the county to give us more money so that we're competitive. The first part of this is to address recruitment and retention of teachers, and to do that, we have to have competitive salary. To get bus drivers, we need competitive salaries. To get everybody. Our staffing problems are partly due to the fact that they can go right next door to Prince William and get more money. So
I
we need to,
I get
yeah.
all that, I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm not
So I guess,
agreement with that. I'm asking what the funding strategies are.
right. So the first year, we set a multi-year funding strategy to address division needs and anticipated growth challenges. So we've changed that.
That's my question, Dr. Warner. What are the division needs and anticipated growth challenges that we address? Mr. Fulmer is telling us we address the teacher salaries, which is absolutely an important part of that. Was it limited to that? It seems to me that if these are gonna be our goals, we need to put them in writing and be able to understand, so we're all interpreting them, understanding them, and knowing what our priorities are. That's all.
Right.
I don't disagree. I
Yeah.
think it's
Well, we did also,
licensed
Right.
salaries, but there's a lot more
right.
to it than that.
Well, we
So
did
if
also,
haven't done it,
yeah.
I'll
Sorry.
finish very quickly. If we haven't done it yet, considering that we are now going to have a goal potentially to continue implementation, it seems we really need to articulate in writing what those funding strategies are that we're going to continue to implement.
Yeah, we did bring all the service sectors up to the median. We have been trying to increase hiring and we're going to be meeting at the FAB to address teacher loads greater than 150 students and looking at both class sizes for middle school and high school. So those are all part of this. Some of this we did manage to get done last year. Some of it we're still working on.
So it sounds like the ones that we worked on and the one we completed versus the ones that we're still going to work on.
Right.
We just need to make it available, written to the public per Ms. Healy. So, yeah.
Yes. And I agree, we should
Okay.
be transparent.
Next.
Dr. Warner, what about, as the bullet, and just for everybody to think about, so we don't lose the number one, I really like that bullet under it of I wonder if our goal is to establish a sustainable and competitive compensation scale at all levels, which is that first bullet. Then kind of taking the number one, and this is just me thinking it because I think in outline
Yeah.
form.
Mhm.
The either continue the implementation for licensed staff. I also think high need areas is maybe something we might, so it's kind of breaking down the big picture of compensation into I don't know, that's just, I'm trying to use the words and move them around. You and I have been doing that a lot. So I don't know if that's helpful or not helpful.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a draft,
Yeah.
right?
Right,
And it's a
exactly.
work session so that we can clean it
So
up.
that we can
Yep.
get everybody on board, that's what we're trying to do.
Understood.
So I understand Ms. Healy's point, and I think that, I think instead of continued implementation of a multi-year strategy, we should just say, we need to address division needs and create a competitive compensation scale across all sectors, and then break the points down and talk about continuing the phased-in approach to the licensed staff and the high needs areas and maybe reducing class sizes, middle school and high school.
I don't see a problem with leaving multi-year strategies, just somewhere you need to write what it is. That's all. There's nothing wrong with that.
Especially since we developed it last year and now we're continuing it, whatever it is, should be
Nothing wrong with that.
defined.
Yeah.
You know? Okay.
All right, so I will work on the wording for that before the next, where's that for us for action? Any other questions? Or,
Are we on
I don't
one?
have any questions, but maybe you can avoid all of the aches and pains regarding the way this is worded. Maybe changing the word strategy to continued funding request as initiated last year with a multi-year, I wouldn't call it strategy, I would call it something else, funding request. That might eliminate some of this back and forth.
Is it only funding requests, though?
Sorry?
Is it only funding requests?
Well,
That's what's
in
being
lieu of a
addressed.
strategy, I don't recall seeing, like Ms. Healy said, I don't recall seeing anything in writing that looks at a strategy. To me would be a revenue sharing agreement with the Board of Supervisors, which we definitely don't have. So that's all I'm saying. It's wordsmithing, but I get Ms. Healy's point.
yeah, I do too, and I think I think that it just needs to be, the phrasing needs to be adjusted to, because there isn't probably a written strategy. These are requests that we make, but it's not necessarily, and these are ways we're trying to make it feasible for the Board of Supervisors to work with us, is by creating a long-term plan so that we know what our needs are as best we can.
So, I'm sorry. A strategy is a plan. We have a plan, right? We have a plan. I just heard the plan. It's a plan. There's nothing wrong with the word. Just know what it is, know what it means, and write it out. There's nothing wrong with the word.
Madam Chairman, I think it's good to have a strategy, but a strategy to me is a way to approach a goal. It's how are we going to get there? What do we need to do? You know, what are we going to be asking for? What are we going to be doing in-house? And I think, you know, if we had in fact developed one last year, we could just say, here it is.
Yeah.
So if we did not develop one last year, perhaps this is the year
Yeah.
we should. All the
We-
things that you mentioned are important, and we should be doing that, but they would be the end goal of the
Yeah.
strategy and how we're gonna, oh, sorry, and how we're gonna get there. That's all.
Yeah, so I know we had organizational goals, I'm sorry. We had organizational goals, that's part of the strategy. We had a plan of action, that's part of the strategy. So I'm not understanding why, you know, you were doing all of this.
Well,
Just write it out.
so if I might, we were at the 3-on-3 the year before last, and a couple of supervisors, when we pointed out that public safety had had their salaries increased in 1 year, and the supervisors indicated that they would like to help us get our teachers, our licensed staff, competitive as well, but said that because we had so many employees, it could not be done in 1 year, and could we come up with a multi-year approach? And so last year, Dr. Kisner and Mr. Fulmer brought to us a 3-year sort of way of condensing the scale from 39 years to 30 years, and moving salaries in the mid-range and the upper experience levels, years of experience, so that it was more competitive. So that was
The strategy.
now, was it for everything? No, it was for licensed staff. That's my recollection. Maybe other people don't recall that, but that's what I recall.
And like you also said, that we were able to condense the years for the other service employees, because that was also supposed to be a multi-year, and we were able to condense that one too.
That's the plan. That's the plan. You're good.
Okay. So, we'll wordsmith that. We'll add the details on what we
Mike.
worked on.
Mhm.
Sorry. So what other changes does the board want to see in this document?
I like number 2, addressing, I'm wondering if keeping growth as the big driver of budget demands, we can, and then I think we can kind of bullet out, so we have, I know, I'm such an outliner, that we have 2 bullets under there, I'm sorry. But I think we can break that, like, class size, CIP, 3R, and capacity need. I think we can kind of group them into, because it's all there. It's more just having more than one bullet, because I do think this is a big bullet so it was just kind of breaking out because I think growth is a class size driver, or CIP, 3R, and capacity. You know, it's all there. I think it's just pulling them. I'm not sure if we're saying that we want to, with regard to hiring qualified teachers and staff, is it additional? Or, because I'm not sure that growth is the thing for the hiring of the teachers. I think it's recognizing we need more teachers. I don't know how, but the concept is all there. I'm just pulling those out because I think those make sense. But saying that, you know, our special services, ESL populations, and just kids in general is spurring the need for additional staff, which right now, in a very competitive time, may be more challenging than in the past. I don't know, maybe that's not even need to be in there.
Can I,
But you see where I'm trying to say about
yeah.
saying how the growth part impacts that staff numbers are gonna go up, and I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah, I have two questions. One, Stafford PPE, is that going to be updated before? I don't know when the state gives us those numbers. And then my other question is, we don't really have anything here about addressing the effect of the pandemic and the fact that there probably is additional catch-up that students are going to need, and I don't know where the appropriate place for that would be, but I would definitely like to see one of our priorities being recovering or continuing to work through this.
Oh,
I
Well,
think
wait a
that could
minute.
be added as a bullet under expanding the PPE, and I think looking at remediation, and I think it also covers under decreasing class sizes in middle school and high school, and focusing on high needs areas. I think we can add
And
that.
social, emotional, family, that kind of thing that we have definitely talked about in the past.
That was our third bullet in that one from 2021, which actually I think was pretty well stated, so just something.
Yeah, so I was thinking the same thing. I wrote here a little note, mental health. And I wasn't sure where we were gonna fit that, because we do have the counseling, and we do increase counseling and psychologists and psychiatrists and all that kind of stuff, but, should we not have it somewhere on here?
I was thinking under PPE.
Hmm?
Do you think it would work under PPE?
Wherever you wanna put it.
I mean, I think, yes, we should. I agree that we should add a bullet that stresses that. The most logical place is PPE, and that's someplace where the county funds help us both to be competitive and to add extra services above SOQs. So that would be an appropriate place, in my opinion.
Well, and some of it can be using the funds that we're receiving from the federal government as well, as making sure that those monies are being sent to what they need to be spent on.
And this is, the only other thing I'm looking at is the shall and the shall and the should, Ms. Healy. I was looking at number 2 where it says, address demands of growth or infrastructure, staffing, and transportation. So that is a little bit not clear to me, because I'm thinking the infrastructure itself, it is not going to grow. It just needs to be implemented with development and things of that nature. So I'm trying to understand how you want it to, how this is worded.
Yeah, I'm thinking that infrastructure is things like buses and trailers and other things that we may have to put in place to accommodate capacity needs, especially in the absence of, as we wait for schools to be built.
Because there's so many different types, so
Right.
that's why I was wondering.
And
if we
so
should just be
infrastructure seems more of
specific.
a term to describe hard goods that we may have to purchase.
Can I say?
Okay.
And just listening to Sarah and just thinking about the fundings that we currently have been given for COVID, I'm wondering if it shouldn't just be a budget item in and of itself. I mean, it is a pandemic that we're trying to work through. It is the social emotional, the class size, additional recovery programs, things like that, showing our side of what we've done with funding, and then making sure that we're clear where we need more assistance, maybe. Just a thought.
I think she's gonna do that, Susan.
What?
I think she is gonna put that, an
That's a
extra
separate-
bullet.
Okay.
Dr. Warner, let me just give an idea. Like I said, I was wondering, address the ongoing and long-term impact and consequences of COVID-19 on school operations, learning loss, social and emotional development, staff and student. Sorry, I was just sort of, because I really do think we really have to say it, because we don't even know yet. We have been open a week and 2 days. of what, I don't- of what
I don't think
our
anything will
long-term impacts are, and I know, I am very much, if you can hone in, but we may find as the school year goes on, there is challenges or impacts, consequences, ramifications, whatever word we want to use, of COVID that we won't know until we're in the classroom and until we're in for even a few weeks. And I'm not trying to be broad and say we don't know what they are, but we want to be able to stand in there. And I feel like not maybe saying COVID-19, I feel like we need to, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 months.
We already are hearing from parents whose children have been quarantined and who are going to be out of the classroom for 2 weeks and then coming back into the classroom. And that's going to be disruptive, and that's going to have an effect. And so, yeah, this is not done by any means.
So I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to put in a reference to the federal funds, that we will be using those funds for these things as indicated, and talk about reducing class size, quarantine, social emotional needs. So that we're acknowledging, yes, we did get these federal funds, but we also have a high demand for those funds in putting them to work for the schools.
Ms. Healy, I think I saw your.
What is the estimated growth for this year? I know we don't know officially until
I thought it was
September
1,000.
30th, but,
About 1,000?
I mean, a lot generally drop off between the first day of school and September
That was
30th.
1,000,
Do
maybe.
you think,
I have it, yeah.
Give it. Because one thing we want to, well, Chris is looking for it, so Chris, jump in when you're ready. But even still with regard to COVID, we may be using CARES and other ACT money, but I think we want to begin to still fill those, if it's positions, if it's whatever, we want to be able to transition, if those are needs we need to long-term address. The money may be for, I forget, 1 or 2 years. We may want to make sure we are already beginning to hire or address those. So, anyway, just a comment.
Just for reference, those, the last ESSER funds are to September 2024.
Okay, but still, we want to be ready. Sorry, Mr. Fulmer, I figured I'd give you a little time.
No, yeah, thank you. We had already run the numbers, just needed to pull it up. So now, keep in mind, September 30th from last year to today, or Monday, actually yesterday, was about 1,075 kids. So, but we still haven't hit that drop period. So we know some of those kids are going to come down, but that is a big increase. We usually see that 800, 900, and then we drop back down. Maybe it's 600, 700 in a pre-COVID year that we would see in any given year. So 1,000 is a lot. Now we expect a couple hundred of those to fall off after the 10 days, but still going to be a pretty high number.
so, and what was the difference between the year before that? Because last year was such an abnormal year. Do you
Yeah,
have
so
the difference between
So once
now and
again,
2 years ago?
And we'll once we hit our September 30th, we'll give you the official numbers of where we fall. But we're a couple hundred higher than we were 2 years ago. So we had a big drop last year in COVID. We lost a lot to homeschool, private school. But a lot of them, we're hearing it from the principals about the kids that were out last year homeschooled and they've returned. So I'm trying to think of what the number was 2 years ago, but it's a couple hundred higher, probably 300 higher than it was back then.
Okay, so the fact that we have a significant growth this year is in large part due to the decrease last year. If we, that's why when we get these numbers, I'd like to get 2 years ago, last year, and this year. And we know it's going to go down. So 1,000, that does sound like a lot. That's actually what we were adding at around the year 2000. Every year, we would add 1,000 students for a number of years, but we'd also add a new school. We'd be increasing along that range. But I just want to keep it in perspective. I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with addressing the demands of growth on infrastructure, staffing, and transportation. Certainly, that is a portion of the issue, but there are demands on the infrastructure just because of aging. There are demands on staffing because of the changes in the, in the students coming in. one example is the number of languages spoken here, our ESL needs. And of course, transportation, that's always been, a need area. But, with the increase in housing in the rural areas, that's going to increase the demands on transportation, because it's not the same as stopping, on a corner in a subdivision and, having the kids get on the bus. So if there's a way we could expand that, not to limit it to the demands of growth, because if in fact it's a couple hundred from 2 years ago, I'm not sure that's as significant an
So-
impact.
I just think we need a couple more bullets specifically to what infrastructure you're reporting here and which growth and what is actually affecting. If the growth is affecting the staffing because of XYZ, if it's affecting transportation because of the development, maybe specifying that a little bit more.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm going to take your advice, and I'm going to go ahead and say it. I'd like to see a little bit more emphasis put on the 3R. And I agree with what Ms. Healy just said about all of these other things. The infrastructure is really important, and I'm going to use Brook Point High School as an example. We all saw the email from Shiloh today about, we've needed chillers in that building for a long time, and then we've got teachers in there with 35 kids in 100 degrees outside in the middle of a pandemic. That's not good.
Wearing masks.
Wearing masks in that heat. So the 3R list is just as important as all of these other priorities on here, and I'm saying it for the record, so thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Anderson, are the chillers at Brook Point one of the ones that are on the list for replacement this winter?
Not this winter, no, but it's coming up soon.
Coming
It may
up
be
soon.
being,
Moved up the list.
2022, I believe.
I can say I think they were originally scheduled to be replaced and they did get pushed
Right.
because of funding. So it was one of the unfunded projects that got pushed farther out.
I have one more. I don't know where it belongs. So we talked about the 1,000 additions of kids and that it may not be the right number. But I was thinking more along the lines of virtual. And I've been keying on this for a couple of months now, and I just need to know where on here, because it's still going to be, I think virtual is just going to be part of life in terms of the future of the school, that it's not going to go away right now. And so I think that it needs to be somewhere on the list, either under that last bullet where you have the mental health and all that stuff, but we need to put it somewhere because we need to be able to pivot. Yep. Infrastructure? Is that
Dr.
what you're
Jones
saying?
was suggesting it could maybe go in infrastructure. But I do think it's important to not invite the argument that we don't need new schools because we can just have a third of our students be virtual. And so I think it's very important that we are not opening that door.
So this is not a door. This is actually the window into the future in terms of, while COVID exists, while there's going to be different variances, we need to be able to know when there's groups of kids that are going to be quarantined, that we could move them, hopefully fairly quickly, and then when they're well, to come back and then do the reverse.
I've just heard from supervisors who've stressed how important it is that we get everybody back in school, and at the same time, how we don't necessarily need a high school because everybody can be virtual. So it's kind of hard to balance those two requests, but I want to make sure that we're not, at least unless the board wants to go in that direction.
I think we have to plan anyway. I mean, at least until, 2024, 25, that it's now state law that we have to provide in-school instruction 5 days a week. So if a third of our student body decides to do it and they say, oh, gosh, we want to come back, we have to, by law, we have to accommodate them,
Well,
so.
and not only that, we continue to grow. We're going to
Correct,
continue
I'm
to
just
grow.
supporting what Dr. Chase just said.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing.
So I.
No, I know. I'm agreeing with you.
So my suggestion would be that when I add the section about using the federal funds, that I will add virtual under that as another bullet point, that we have to be able to pivot as long as we have students in quarantine. But I agree with Dr. Chase, I don't want to emphasize that this is an option, that we aren't going to be moving a third of our high school students into a virtual environment, that we need physical structures. So I think it's better to keep it under those federal funds and not make it a separate category as part of our budget.
Well, and like I said, the
The-
federal funds.
I'm
will-
sorry. The only reason why I'm bringing that up is because that is going to be time-consuming. It is instructional design that needs to happen. If Virginia Star, whatever it is, doesn't have any room, then we need more teachers, or we need more individuals that are going to, so it is work. It is time-consuming, it's work, and it's stuff that needs to be done. And then when they're well, they come back into the school system, so there needs to be a rotation, and we cannot burden the same teachers to do async and to do, classroom instruction, and that's hard. So, Dr. Jones, you want to add to it?
I think we can get at through the infrastructure, because what you're really talking about is how we're leveraging technology to engage kids who may not be in school physically. So that's,
Okay.
I would offer the infrastructure as an umbrella for how we might do that.
And Dr. Warner, maybe I'm not making I think we need to mention the federal funds with CARES Act, but that's not, to me, the emphasis. We have to be preparing for a post, I'm hoping, COVID or something, and the impacts of that for a long time. And maybe I'm not saying it right. I just think we're going to be needing to start to put in our actual budget the ability to react to whatever we learn in the next month. We may learn some of it in a year. So I just think, and I'm going to look at Dr. Jones, I'm going to say, I don't know what those are, but I want to say, at some point, it's going to have to be part of our operational budget. So I don't want there to be this reliance, well, you can just use the federal, and I don't know, does that make any sense, what I'm trying to?
Yeah, I think that under PPE, I think one of the things that maybe we need to add is the flexibility to adapt to, unexpected things. Like, none of us 2 years ago were
Nope.
expecting the year that we had. So I think that's definitely something that can go under PPE, but I don't want the Board of Supervisors to think that those federal funds are a substitute for.
That's
Yeah.
where I was going.
Right, for me, we need teachers, and we're going to need experienced teachers, and when the federal funds run out, we still need to have those teachers.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need to say, oh, it's time to get rid of you. I have a feeling that's not at all what we're saying. So it was just transitioning into those become operational expenditures. Let's not all go and ask in 1 year for $60 million. Well, maybe, but I'm just saying, just to be looking at that. So, perfect.
I appreciate all the input. If you would all like to send me some of your specific comments, then I will work on editing this so that it will be presented for information, unless there's some additional comments.
You
We
get
don't
the
have
hard
to-
job doing
We
it.
don't have to send you what we said, do we? Oh, good.
I just,
Time
I've been
is
taking
limited
notes.
these days. If you got it, Missy got it, we'll
yeah.
put it
No,
on
I
the
just
record.
meant if there's anything you think of between now and when we
specific
present
wording,
it
yeah.
specifically, please send it to me, but I will go ahead and work on it. Unless there's something else, I will go ahead and work on editing based on my notes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you all. Let's move on to our next item, is we're going to be having a transportation update and discussion. I will look at Dr. Jones, and looks like Mr. Fulmer as well, to lead us.
Boom, boom, boom.
While you're
E-drive
getting
is
set
not
up.
accessible. It's so cold in here. I have a long sleeve shirt. Whoever brought me the Tazo.
This was my library, it didn't have, it was mine, no way.
Huh?
Yeah. Stafford Middle.
Maybe they're getting the drinks.
This first year they opened up the PDC, was the Pizza Hut building, all fifth grade was in there. That's what we called it.
Mr. Fulmer, you can get started when you want. Sorry, I had to get my caffeine.
All right. I don't know if we need to wait for Miss Young, or is she coming right back?
I think she was saying, it's getting some water, so you can
All right.
go ahead and start with your intro.
All right, so appreciate you having Mr. Baldwin and I back this evening to provide a little bit of an update of where we were last Tuesday when we spoke with you, and today. I want to emphasize, I'm going to talk about some of the improvements we've made, but in no way are we where we want to be, and that's going to kind of be an emphasis of, we've made some huge gains from last week, and a lot more kids are getting to school on time, and a lot more kids are getting home quicker than they were last week, and we've improved our efficiency in a lot of areas, but we still have a long way to go. And so we still have some short-term fixes there in the next week or so, and then we still have some long-term fixes, and we'll talk about that not only in this presentation, but also in the following presentation when we talk about those bus driver recruitment and retention strategies.
Madam Chair, are we going to hold all our questions till the end of the presentation?
Let's do that. if
Great,
that's
thank
all right.
you.
Board members?
So, areas of concern, I put bus driver shortage at the top. That is still our primary concern of how do we get out of where we're at today and continue to improve. And we need drivers. So we can improve communication, we can condense routes, but we can only condense so many routes. And so either way, we need the bus to fill our bus driver vacancies. And this isn't something that's only occurring in Stafford. This is state and nationwide. But I believe we have a plan going forward where we can attract a good number of bus drivers and close that gap. The communication. So first of all, we, once again, have improved greatly with our communication, trying to notify everyone that's on a double run. We've assigned those double runs, that they all have assigned routes and bus drivers now so that we can get the communication out more timely. Doesn't mean that they're the first run. Some of them have double runs, which means they have to go back out and pick them up, which means they're going to be late, or they're going to be cutting it very close in some of those instances. But we have improved their communication. It is still a big area of concern. One of our biggest reasons is, when I say the communication, it's getting back to our parents timely, not only reporting the bus driver, the bus number changes and times. Our experts, which are our lead drivers, usually handle this for us. Well, every single one of them, and they're not the only ones handling this, but they're a big part of that. They can take those calls, look at a route and say, hey, this is when it's going to be coming now based on this call out that we had. All of them are not in the office. They're all out driving buses. So that puts us back. And it's, we've tried to add additional staff in transportation, but it's a little different. You need an experienced person that knows the system, knows the in and outs of how it operates. So that leads to us not always responding timely. We're trying to get back to every email, every phone call timely. There are a lot of them. That has considerably decreased over the past week, and have spoken to a lot of parents that have communicated that, hey, we've seen great improvements, we would just like to see more, and what is that long-term goal? So we're notifying the parents of the substitute buses. However, there's just restrictions and limitations on what we can do. So we can tell them, hey, you have a substitute bus. We can't update in the app what that arrival and departure time would be, depending on the bus arriving or the bus departing the school and then them arriving home. A lot of that is to do, once again, we have limited, our lead drivers, which are experts, are out of the office, but some of it is when we split a route. So we know that bus 200 is going to be unfilled today. We're now taking bus 190 and 195, and they're going to take half of those kids each. And so we split that bus into two. Well, that's not a very clean break where we can break it, put them on the buses, and update the app to show that. So we know there are a lot of concerns of folks that are looking at the app and saying, hey, the app is not giving me accurate information. We know that. One of the things we can talk about as we go through the presentation is we're going to put out a one-page document that says, this is when the app is 100% accurate, which 90% of the time is true. But when we have these substitute buses and the adjustments, that app is not going to be accurate. Sometimes it's accurate, but not until the bus starts its second run. So it's not great. So if you're on that second run and you're the third stop or the second stop, it's not going to update in the app until the bus gets to its first stop. So not the most useful information for a parent or a student that's tracking it, wanting to know when the bus is going to arrive. Another big area of concern, not only all of our students trying to get them timely to school, but we know we have an issue with our travel students because of the time of the day and the rotation to getting them to their travel school and then back at the end of the day from their travel school. So we're looking at different options there. We think we've cleaned up a lot of it. I think, and Tom, Dr. Nichols, update me, but or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think CGS is a lot better shape than it was in the previous week. But some of our other programs, we still have some work to do there. And so a lot of times we're getting them there, maybe a little bit late, but getting them back because of the way it overlaps with our other bus runs is a challenge.
Can I just interject there? So one of the things we have to think about too is because we know students are still tardy now, can we engage them synchronously, virtually, while they're waiting for the bus? So we're looking at those kinds of options. We're also considering options as if, can we offer, if they're missing a core class, can we offer that course where they are? So we're looking at every available option we need to consider. Of course, that will be short term.
I'll echo what I said before we even started the presentation, which is we still have a lot of improvement to make, but I do want to touch on we have made significant ground. So we're hearing continued improvements from the principals. Almost every day we're hearing, hey, we set a record today. Kids are out earlier. More kids came in on time. That's a significant, that's music to our ears. That's what we want to hear is, hey, more kids are reporting on time. We don't stop there, obviously, because 90% of them are getting on time, if there's 2-3 buses that are arriving late, those are the ones now that we need to get earlier, and that's where it's going to take some drivers and some route consolidation. But we are reporting a lot more on-time buses. I mentioned we decreased the number of our unassigned routes, which means all of our unassigned routes have been placed with an assigned driver. Those are second loads, though, and we know that, and we know they're late, and so started the communication on a daily basis to those second runs, right, Mr. Baldwin, of sending that out and letting you know, hey, your bus is going to be late today, expect it. But we have, been able to consolidate that total number of routes just based on how the first week has gone. We're not eliminating students from the routes, which I know is a concern that, hey, just because I haven't ridden now doesn't mean I need one next week, and I'll get into that in a few minutes. I want to thank our drivers. Our drivers have been incredible for the past week and a half. We usually have, just in a typical year, 15, 20 call-outs, especially Fridays, Mondays can be very heavy call-out days. Our drivers not only are coming to work, but when they're here, they are putting in some hours. They are volunteering to pick up any extra run they can. They will take kids home, call in and say, let me know what else can I do. And so I can't thank them enough for the dedication that they've had over the past week and a half. It was a concern even as we add more drivers to our fleet, eventually those call-outs are going to come, whether they're scheduled call-outs, it could be for medical reasons. So we need at least the drivers to keep pace with the progression in those call-outs. Our arrival times and afternoon dismissal times have improved, and we not only can track that, but we can also hear from the principals and from a lot of parents and families that have, we receive emails that say, hey, just wanted to follow up and say thank you. The bus was here on time today. We got home on time today. Some of the evidence is we track when is the last kid at home on a daily basis. So not just when they leave the school, but when that last bus drops that last kid off in the county. Last week, those first 2 days, and even as we slowly decreased that time, but yesterday was 5:50, today was 5:35. That is over an hour better than we were last week. So that is a clear sign of the improvement we're making, and we're hearing it from our high schools about how quickly now the buses are getting there sooner to get the kids home. We've improved our processes for loading and unloading. So continuing to make progress there. We want to get them home sooner, believe me, but making considerable progress. So our next steps. Number one, driver recruitment and onboarding. I'll touch on that more on how we're going to do that with our scale and incentives. But just a quick update. Last week I told you that we had 13 trainees in class. It's actually 14. We got 13 just out of our job fair that we put on about a month ago. But we had one more that had trickled in right before that. That's finishing up their time as well. They will all start entering our fleet at the end of next week, around August 31st. And then we have another class starting later this week. Now they take several weeks before we get them in. But some of our proposed changes is trying to attract drivers that already have their CDL license. And we talked about that at the FABC meeting, and it will be an emphasis tonight. What we've done is streamline what that process looks like. You know, it's not often that in the past that we've had a ton of experienced drivers come, but we're seeing more now. I wish I knew her name. We have a driver that retired from up north, came down here, and she is actively recruiting from her former district of bus drivers that live in Stafford, and that can retire from a separate retirement system and come down here and still work full-time and collect a paycheck here and up there. And I'm going to call, I told our HR people I'm going to call and personally thank her, and hopefully she can keep that up. So we have some proposed changes to our driver scale and then some additional incentives, and that's what the next agenda item is about. That's focusing on signing bonuses, which we offer a small one now. We want to enhance that and target certain groups. We're also going to propose a scale enhancement, which will impact our new and experienced drivers with one-to-one placement. So if a bus driver comes here with 16 years of experience, we're going to give them all 16 years of experience. We're not going to cap them, say, no, you got to start at the beginning of the scale. So we'll discuss that soon following this. So, you know, kind of our next steps too, we're going to continue to improve our communications with parents about delays and our sub-bus coverage. I already mentioned we've improved that greatly from last week. We know where some of those limitations are. Starting last week, Mr. Baldwin added on our website, hey, if this was your original run and it was vacant, or, you know, here's your new run, new bus number. And then updating that, you know, in Parent View and the route finder, so it provides better information. Another thing we're excited about, we had looked into this, you know, before this week, last week. It just takes some time to implement. But there are tablets you can put on our buses, and not only can you track when a student comes on and off. Now that's a little bit more of a piece that we have to implement because there has to be some sort of, you know, proximity tag or something that you would touch when you're going by there, like a student ID badge. But we can track when a student gets on and off the bus, but it will also show the driver who needs to get off at that stop, so we can have a better track and show, you know, a picture with the student information. It also allows us real-time updates for routing information. So if a bus route needs covered by a different driver, we're able to wirelessly, you know, send that to that bus tablet so the driver can pull it up. It provides the GPS, the route sheet, everything the driver needs, instead of having, you know, to flip through the route sheet, a piece of paper to know where the next stop is. So there's a video there. I'm not going to pull it up, but hopefully the digital version that will be loaded on the website, it takes you to a YouTube video, and you can kind of see what that tablet looks like and what the goal of those tablets are. And so we'll come back with more information on that in the future once we pull it all together. But I wanted to let you know that that's something that we have been exploring and will continue to, and try to implement that. I don't know what the implementation timeline looks like, if it's something that we can implement, you know, periodically, you know, bus by bus throughout the year, or if it's something that we wait until next summer or over the winter break, but we will be exploring that and getting you more detail. And then lastly, we've talked about tweaks to our bell schedule. Do we need more time between each shift to provide more flexibility for our buses to get between middle school and high school? It's just something we're not ruling out. We will explore it. We want to get our opt-in survey results back and see where we can consolidate our routes. So we did a prior survey back at the beginning of summer, and we had 18,000 responses. Approximately 3,000 people responded that they did not need transportation. So we routed 26,000 students. And that actually increased as we kept adding students, but that's what we started with. We put out a survey last week, had a very quick turnaround. sent a lot of reminders. Currently have about 27,000 responses, with currently around 6,800 that have answered no to that. We know we still have a gap there where we need to reach out to. So we are taking that, we closed that survey this afternoon, actually. We take that data down. We're kind of scrubbing it, make sure, we had some duplicate entries in there. We had some folks that had already, hey, can I change my selection? Which will provide a little bit of flexibility, but we're going to have to kind of close that as well so we can start routing. This will allow us to update our routes, consolidate, hopefully after we call the other several thousand students or reach out. A lot of them we can probably eliminate. They could be virtual students. It could be, a lot of the, we're hoping principals and teachers can look right away and say, hey, little Johnny, he's going to ride the bus every day. I know that. So he just didn't fill out the survey. So we're gonna try to close the loop on as many of those students that did not respond. Allows us to update our routes, and we're looking at doing that for the rest of this week, over the weekend, early next week. We're gonna see how long it takes. As soon as we feel comfortable with that, we will roll that out to parents, send out new information and say, hey, here's your new pickup time and bus number. We don't expect drastic changes except where we're able to consolidate routes. So I think a lot of people that are already on a first shift elementary school, second shift elementary school, are getting to school on time, or if your bus has been getting to school on time, you might not see drastic changes. But some of our students will see changes, and hopefully that's going to allow us to be more efficient and get kids to school on time. I already mentioned this, but there is a note at the bottom that 27,000 roughly responses, that is raw data of total responses. We know there's some duplicates in there. We've already seen them. So we've got to finish cleaning that up, but we wanted to just give you the raw data. We just closed it this afternoon, so we're in the process of scrubbing that. And so that is it. Mr. Baldwin, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add before we turn it over to questions, or if I was accurate.
You're good, you're good. Summed it up well.
All right. Ms. Hollerback, go ahead.
So kudos to whomever came up with the idea to separate the car rider lines from the bus lines. I saw some very complimentary things on social media about at least the high schools and the middle schools were able to separate the buses from the car riders, and when they did that, it just significantly moved the process along. So whoever came up with that, congratulations and kudos.
Can I, before you go on, I want to thank the Sheriff's Department. They have provided deputies and tried to help in our really high volume areas and our troubled areas. And then additionally, we have principals that are out in the roads directing traffic, trying to get them. Well, we're trying to get crossing guards, but that's a process as well of trying to get them in here. And Greg Martin is helping us with that. But I just want to, while I had the chance, thank the principals that are getting out there and directing that traffic. We've had some great ideas, and Sheriff's Office is providing ideas too, as well as we try to do exactly what you said, which was give the buses a direct path to get in and out of the school.
Great. Takes a village, right?
Yes.
How are we getting folks into the DMV to settle the CDL requirements through them? Or I heard there was a backlog, you had to get an appointment, all that good stuff.
Well, currently, we do not have a backlog. We've been able to get all of those folks an appointment. Where the barrier is when it's not related to their CDL. So those are what we have, but we have a direct line. It's been a priority. I've had an elected official reach out to help out and encourage if I need to get in contact with him to push the DMV. He's given that contact, so that's very appreciative. So we're good with this 14 that we have in class now. We're going to monitor and track this next 15 that starts later this week and see how that goes.
Great, thanks. I have one more, but I'm going to hold it for the next, it's probably more appropriate for the next item, so.
All right. Sounds good. Who's
I got a list. I was just going to.
Go ahead, Ms. Young. Give two or three.
Two or three? Okay, yeah.
Rounds,
Sure.
so I can-
So I just wanted to thank Mr. Baldwin and his team, the bus drivers, Chris, Dr. Kisner, he takes my calls at any time, at night and morning. Dr. Jones. I really, really mean this. I mean, that you all had stepped up. The sheriff's office, they take my text, especially when the parents are calling. And to those parents out there that not only took their kids to school, but picked up their neighborhood kids, because I'm in some of these Facebook pages where I see them like, hey, do you want me to pick up Dan? He's on my route, and I'll take him to school. And so I do thank every single one of you all for the efforts that you all put through. And yes, there are some good emails coming in and saying, thank you, it's on time. Oh my God, the bus was on time 2 minutes early, so that's a problem sometimes too, right? But thank God for that. I want to know what else we could do for you. What do you need? Because if you don't tell us what you need, we won't know.
All right. Be the best advocate right now. Encourage folks to I've thrown out the ideal of paying it forward. Volunteer sometimes. I've tried to get out to our schools, and I've met parents who have dropped their kids off and just introduced myself, and it's like, how can I help? What can I do? So folks are willing. The parents that I've talked to on the phone about all of the situations, some are understanding, some are not, but I understand. We're going to work hard, and I just need them to understand that that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to what I need, we need drivers, and I need folks to be an advocate and be a support to our kids and understand that we're trying to do the same. We all want the same, is to provide a safe and timely arrival to our students.
You have the mic right there. You could ask the public right now. You need bus drivers, right? And we're paying good. And
All the time.
yes, that's right. So I know that you're in the office and you probably need someone to help you. And I was wondering, when you get the information from the ground, there are some folks out there that know the roads and that have been around for a while that you might want to lean on them for information. They get along very well with most of the bus drivers, and I'm thinking that for the time being, to have someone close to you to work with you, to help you, we're not taking them off the route. We're just asking them to help you a little bit more until you have that support that you need in your office, because I know somebody is missing in there that is not yet hired. So I was wondering if you could just pull somebody in there with you to help.
Well, that goes back to our leads, and then they are on the front line between the parents, the schools, and the transportation piece. Whenever they're not on a route, they are in the office helping. I'm still looking to fill certain voids in the staff, and I have folks that have really stepped up in the office to do over and beyond of what they've been asked to do on a regular basis. So I do believe everyone is chipping in over and beyond, and if I can find those persons that are willing to come in and help, it's going to be in between our downtime. Between that morning and afternoon arrival. And that's kind of the bulk of where we do the bulk of the work in a day. So those leads, once they get off the bus, they come in and they immediately hit the phones and their email to try to respond to the most apparent questions or concerns.
And that's not volunteer, we're paying them, right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And this is my third one, so now I'll let it go by, right? The kindergartners and the first graders, those color white and whatever colors there are,
Right.
are we planning on making them neon so that they could be seen? Where are we with that? Are we planning on doing that?
So,
Kind of speak to it. We're definitely exploring that idea. We have to coordinate, because white was originally selected because it was a color that none of the other schools were using for other tags. And so we've got to make sure we can identify a new tag that's universal for every kindergartner and first grader that doesn't confuse the driver and make a difficult situation. So we talked about it. I think I don't want to make too quick of a change there. It's a process that's worked for many years. But it maybe is, if it's something that we can hold off until we actually have this transportation committee,
Yeah.
and we can bring in and get some parent and bus driver perspectives on that as well.
Okay, sounds good. Pass.
All right. Ms. Healy, you want to go next?
You mentioned that the app is not as accurate with substitute buses. So could you define what a substitute bus is? Tell us how many substitute buses we have and approximately how many students are riding these substitute buses.
So a substitute bus is basically an unassigned bus in our system. But right now, every driver that is driving has an assigned bus that can be utilized as a sub bus. So whenever an assigned run has to be covered, chances are it will be another assigned bus listed as the sub bus. It's a little confusing, isn't it?
Well, I'm just trying to get a picture of the students affected, because I think that's who I'm hearing from, the ones that
Right.
either have an assigned bus that's not the number that's coming to get them or driving them home, or there is not one. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying there really are no, we defined substitute buses originally as buses with an unassigned route, but now that we have assigned routes for everyone, the definition of substitute bus is going to change to something else?
No, we're going to keep it as a sub bus. So in our
But-
document,
But if it's an unassigned route,
Unassigned route.
so when you say unassigned
to
route,
unders- yeah.
I got you. When you say unassigned route, that basically means we do not have an assigned driver. So to compensate for that, we are going to assign it to another driver. So that driver basically will carry 2 loads. So,
So
and
would that be a substitute then? It wouldn't be a substitute if it had an assigned driver.
Well,
I'm really
it's the-
trying to understand, I'm trying to make
you're fine,
confuse you.
you're
but
fine. It's the
trying to
term.
understand this.
It's the term of what we use in the industry. So with the parent app, it works on an assigned and a sub. So we have a 1-to-1 transition. An assigned bus is going to be substituted by what we call a substitute bus. That's it. It's just a term. So we had to do that with all of the unassigned routes. So the unassigned routes have a bus assignment. In order for it to show on the parent app, we have to do what we call an override in the system. We have to cross out the assigned bus, put in the substitute bus. So what parents are seeing now, they see that assigned bus, and some of those, and that's a bus number, some of those buses are fillers. Because in order for it to be seen in the app, it has to be assigned a bus number in order for a sub bus to replace it. So that's where we have those, some of those are fillers. And those fillers were the unassigned routes. So now we're able to assign it with a sub bus, which in reality is just another assigned driver taking it. So we've listed that on our webpage that we keep it, it's very fluid, so it changes every day. And so a school, parents can go to our website and see that here's the filler number, my 350. But for the AM, it's going to be bus 100. For the PM, it may be bus 48 combined. So we have kind of done some, I call it innovative planning to make sure that we've given every route a bus driver. It's probably the easiest way to do it, is every route has a bus driver. That driver may have 2 to 4 to 6, sometimes 8 loads that they're taking within the morning runs and the afternoon runs.
Wow.
So that is they've really stepped up. I mean, a driver with 8 runs is extreme. We don't have many of them doing that. But they may have an assigned elementary and a second load elementary. They may have a primary middle and a second load middle, and then they get to the high school. So whenever that driver doubles, carries a second load, you have twice the time. So the later the time, it's a trickle-down effect. So by the time we get to the middle and the high schools, we are 30, 40, 60 minutes or later late because of the second loads. And that's primarily because we don't have the drivers to accommodate that. And what we're doing in between time is anywhere that we could combine and still manage a bus to be able to get into a school where they don't have to go back out and get a second load. They can get them all in one load coming in. That saves some time. Doesn't say much, it makes the run longer, but it does save some time so that they can start their middle school and start their high school from that standpoint.
So if a student is on a second load, are they going to be on a second load until we get more drivers?
Chances are,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure this out, because if, say, I know my child is on bus number X, and I go in the app, and the app tells me X is on time, you're saying that could possibly be the first run that's on time, not the second run. Is that where the
it's
problem's
possible.
coming in?
It's possible.
So it seems like we need to fix that app so that the app identifies the second load. I mean, if we know the second load is going to be the second load, I mean, and that we used to do that, 15 years ago when my child was in elementary, we had first and second load buses. But, well, we won't go there. But anyway, we need to be able to communicate with parents. And it sounds like it's an app issue, but if there's just one bus and it's going to have, it's going to be filling in somewhere else, and if I go in to look where that bus is, I'm going to not know it's filling in unless there's something there. So that's something we need to obviously work on. How many students are affected? Is this going to vary by day? How many have these substitute buses?
It will vary by day, because depending on the situation and the number of drivers that we have, it may be a different configuration. I will tell you that typically with a bus that has a second load, in the morning where you are the second load, in the afternoon you may be the first load, because as a general practice, we in the mornings we bring in the longer to shorter runs together. In the afternoon, we would take home the shorter run, come back to the school and get the longer run. So it would flip-flop each day. So that's a practice that we have, and it may not be 100% for every route, but that is a practice that we try to maintain so that kids aren't late all the time.
Okay, that runs into my next question. You gave us the 5:50 on Monday and 5:35 is the time the last child was dropped off. What is our scheduled time for the last drop-off?
I might have to get back to you on that to learn what our longest run is.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, I appreciate the improvement, but I'm trying to figure out how far we have to go. So if we could get that information, because just saying in a vacuum really doesn't tell me a whole lot other than we're doing better. And I don't think we could do worse than we've got to improve. All right, that was rhetorical. My last question I'm going to ask has to do with the travel students. You said CGS was doing better, but some other programs are not. How was CGS targeted? Or maybe they weren't, maybe it's just luck of the draw that CGS is doing better, but there's a lot of programs in addition to CGS that travel. So, how did CGS get better and the other ones not do so well?
Well, for one, CGS has a zero block. I'm going to make sure I have Dr. Nichols' approval. We have a zero block. So those students are brought in at the elementary time. And so there's a select group of juniors and seniors that we collect. So there's only a smaller number of buses that we utilize to collect those students for the zero block. In terms of the travel students, everyone follows the same schedule. So the problem that we have is once they get to the high school, then we have to take them to their travel school. And the timing is not there yet because of the fact that if they're doing doubles at the elementary and middle, by the time they get to the high school, they're later. So if we have a target time of 9:20 to have those kids at the target school, high school buses may not be getting there until 9:20. And so they have to load and may not leave until 9:40, and we're already behind the time. So that's our biggest challenge right now when we talk about the travel students and our CGS students and IB students. So all of those students in that program, we're all trying to leave at the same time and move them to the different schools. But we can't move them on time if we can't get to school on time right now.
So what's this CGS? I thought they started with everybody else. Are they getting extra, they
Because
get extra time?
Yeah, what happened was because CGS does broadcasts with other school divisions, and the other school divisions did not change their schedule. The solution that staff came up with was what's called a zero block. So I don't know which grade levels of CGS it is, but they're starting, I'll let Dr. Nichols.
Yeah, with the change in our schedule in order to have the broadcast, our juniors and seniors are starting around 8 o'clock in the morning. So they're getting picked up pretty much with the elementary run, not with elementary, but at the same time. And those kids who cannot drive, again, we do allow kids to drive through permission slips and things. They're getting dropped off at the governor school sites prior to the rest of the high school runs. And then the juniors and seniors, since they have zero block, they finish after the regular high school first block. So they're traveling back to the base school, the juniors and seniors, at 10:50 in the morning. And they're getting a bus. There's no other runs at that time, so we have lots of buses. And at the same time, the 9th and 10th grade governor school kids are being picked up at their base schools and going to the CGS schools and getting there a little after 11. And then they stay until about 1:20, which again, just before the elementary starts their runs. And Mr. Baldwin worked to have the elementary runs, who are close to those high schools, pick up the governor school 9th and 10th graders at around 1:20, drive them back to their base school before that, and then they go right into their elementary run. So that's where the CGS, with the shift in their alignment and programs, we're not competing for buses for the other high school runs, where the other CTE travels, STAT travels are at the same time around 8 o'clock, and they're fighting for the same buses that are going out to pick up all our other high school students.
Right, but our elementary school students are getting there late, and we're picking up CGS students and getting them to high school on buses that could have been used for elementary. So I wasn't aware of that, so I think we need to be looking at every program equally important.
We did hear from a parent last spring talking about offering zero blocks for lots of things, and so I think staff heard that. I think we may be hearing that for next year. But yeah, it's absolutely something that might be a solution to help with some of these travel student problems.
Right? I mean, that's an instructional issue we're going to address independent, but we're going to have to address that at every level. All right, well, I'll hold my other questions. Thank you.
Dr. Chase?
I'm glad to hear that things are starting to improve, and I really appreciate all the work that everybody's been doing. I wanted to remind all of us that Ms. Healy and I, before the COVID pandemic started, we went and met with bus drivers, and we made a adjustment to the salary scale at that time. But I went on a couple of drives with a bus driver, and we had put on our budget before COVID, the last budget before COVID, to start having bus monitors. And this was to help with the stress of, managing 35 kids on a bus while you're driving and having to keep track of traffic and all of that. And that got removed from the budget because of COVID. So I would hope that we'll look at that again moving forward. When we hear about a student running off the bus at the wrong stop, if there'd been a monitor there, that might be less likely to happen. And so I would like us to revisit that. A couple of other things, just, I know that with this flip in the schedule, Ms. Randall mentioned last time that maybe a PSA for parents who haven't had their students ride the bus before to understand how to make that go a little faster. We might want to think about staggering the start and having elementary schools start a couple of days before everybody else to give those elementary school students an opportunity to learn how to ride the bus and to give those parents a chance to take a photograph of their kid in front of the bus without it dominoing into middle and high school running late. And then we talked in the FAB, and I hope the board at the next meeting will entertain the idea of having a transportation advisory committee to look at the transportation study that we had done, but also community parents have an understanding of what some of the issues are at their school. They might have ideas about where we could add crosswalks. Those kinds of things might help. And I just want to say, all of this is budget, right? So if we're going to increase bus driver salary tonight, we need to understand that that'll be written into our budget before we even start for next year. And the public needs to understand that all of these things cost money, and absolutely we should have timely arrival to school, but we also want to have licensed teachers when you get there. So it's a lot, and just to make sure that the community understands that. Thank you.
Ms. Randall?
Thank you. I would also like to thank everyone, because I know we've spent hours and hours reading some of these emails, and I know you get them. I know, I just feel, I feel badly for how things are going for you, Kiba, for the staff, but also for the parents, the kids, and staff. I mean, some of them, we talk about some of the principals coming out, but there's also teachers that are changing their clothes on those really hot days to help get the kids into school, get the kids out of school. When they saw a problem, they called their SROs, called the sheriff's department, and there's been a lot of Herculean efforts to try to fix something that is, as I look at each of these sheets, update of areas of concern. One of the concerns I have, and to continue it, is you talk about travel students' timely arrival to their travel school. I'm just even worried about the middle and the high school getting to first block as a general thing. And so I would love to know, keeping it more to the positive, is what % of middle school buses are arriving, now that we've been a weekend, and maybe I need to ask this at the next meeting, or it could come to me at the next meeting is fine. What % of our middle school buses are arriving to the school with giving those kids at least 5-10 minutes to get to their first block? What % of our buses are arriving to the high schools with the same thing, giving our kids 5 to 10 minutes at least? I mean, technically, I think it should be more, but at least to get to their first blocks. Because I think, one of the things that we have to remember, and it's come up in many of our emails, and I know I was very leery of the switch in the schedule, hearing how it was going to play out still doesn't change I was more worried about the times, but what has obviously been a situation is the fact of the little ones taking much longer to load, much longer to unload than it did the larger kids, the high school kids. You have a parking lot at a high school that, excuse me, I just choked myself, sorry. You have a parking lot for the afternoon at the high school where all, 30 buses are there to get the kids out at one time. That is not the same thing that happens at the elementary school. If the elementary school has 12 buses coming to pick those kids up, there's not room for 12 buses to pick up all those kids at one time. They're never going to be allowed to run out of their school and find their bus. It's going to be a longer and much more complicated process. So, while I feel like we're going to try to keep pushing, this down the road of this switch schedule, I wasn't a fan then, but I was really, really appreciative of the work and the efforts and even the thought of, but to me, protecting the morning meeting and the elementary learning and that sort of thing, I definitely think that's something that needs protecting, but not at the expense of, I don't even know how many thousands of kids, first block, their angst at the bus stop going, oh my God, I'm missing my class, I'm missing a period. And to even offer the async, now you're asking a kid, okay, pull out your laptop and get in. That's a lot of.
Synchronous.
But even still, that's a lot of pressure on that kid who's like, crap, and so, or maybe it can't be done in that class, whatever their first block is. So I'm just still worried that we're going down a hard road that, yes, it is getting better, but are we going to get to a plateau point, or are we going to get every single high school, middle school kid in? Because they're not missing a morning meeting and seat work. They're missing core academic classes, and they have 4 of them in a day, and some of them are missing half, if not a full one, every day. And so far, now I do hope it continues to get better, but I worry, what are we going to do if it gets to a plateau?
So I do want to address it because we have a lot of parents that have the same ideas about, hey, what would we look like if we were back on last year's schedule? So a couple of things. First, I actually love Dr. Chase's idea of, well, maybe elementary starts a couple days early, because there was a learning curve there of, hey, we got to tag them when they get off the bus to make sure we know their bus number, their route number when they get back on the bus. The learning curve of lining them up properly, loading them on the bus quickly, definitely caused delays the first couple. Our schools, those little elementary kiddos have been phenomenal and have really turned that around. In the later part of last week and the early part of this week has been a tremendous impact of improving those times that we already talked about. But I want to point out that our high school runs, even take away any delays from the elementary and middle schools, our high school runs have over 60 double runs as it is. So we don't have enough drivers just to do our high school run. So moving them first means we're still starting our delays first, right? So they're still going to run behind. We're going to do double runs at the high school first, puts us behind for middle and elementary. And then we have potentially, elementary kids not getting home until 5:30, 6 o'clock, and on our worst days around 6:30. So, and obviously that's been improved. I want to make sure I point that out. But so instead we have our high school children getting home later. But I personally, there's some advantages to that over, a 5 or 6 year old not getting home until 5:30 or 6. So all our problems are not solved just by going back to flipping the high school schedule. It really comes down to filling our drivers. And I do think with filling our drivers with the ways we're going to discuss soon is going to make a significant impact. And so this isn't an overnight fix. I've already said that, but we do have some in the pipeline. We've even got some experienced ones coming, and then some ways to attract more.
But I also want to recognize too that impacting, we're impacting the high school and middle school learning, but we're also impacting their abilities to participate in clubs, activities, sports, and things like that in the afternoon. And while, that's just something else, that, again, it's just that social emotional angst that we're putting on a lot of kids. And I'm not saying that, the solution is to flip it back. I'm just saying that I just want to see that we're going to help these kids with this first period no learning. You know, we had situations last week where they were sitting for 3 hours in a library and things like that. So that's just, you know, my angst in this is how many kids, what, like I said, what percentage are we getting? You say better, but what is that? And so I'm just like, I want to know how many kids are getting to school in the middle and the high on time.
Yeah, and we'll get that to you. We don't,
Yeah, that's fine.
we started working on it this week,
Sure.
but because of the way the double runs and the
Right.
split runs work, it's actually a little bit harder to get, you know,
Right,
to
right.
figure
No
out.
problem. Thank you.
Dr. Warner?
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Kiva and his staff. I want to thank Mr. Fulmer for all the effort they've put into the transportation issues. I think that not transporting this many students for 18 months probably has contributed to some of our difficulties. I want to thank the bus drivers. You guys have been rock stars. Thank you. What I'm seeing and hearing from the elementary school is that most of them are getting to school on time. Is that accurate? And they are getting their full instructional days is pretty much intact for
Yeah,
elementary
and there might be a
school.
few exceptions there. It's not every bus. You know, we're going to have a few that run a few minutes late, but that tiered schedule for the elementary school has provided us a lot. I don't even want to call it flexibility because we don't have any flexibility, but
Right.
has provided us that opportunity to get the majority, the bulk of those kids there on time.
And the question I have is, I know that efficiency, there's efficiency experts that can look at how we do the busing and how we do the routes. Are we evaluating those routes to make sure that we are utilizing those buses and bus drivers as effectively as we can?
Yes, that is part of the process with the survey results. That will allow us to better view, because we know who we're targeting, who's actually riding the bus. So now we can really optimize the routes with the turn left, right, turn directions.
Okay. And the last question I have is, do we have our possible alternatives for activity buses that we could set up at each high school so that we could get students to travel programs? Since we wouldn't be picking students up like we would in a normal run, could we get drivers from a different pool that could maybe handle just those travel options?
You would have to think about how they would get them, because they would not be able to drive a school bus because they needed a CDL. So we cannot use passenger vans, like 15 passenger vans. They're kind of allowed through the Federal Motor Agency from that standpoint. So it would have to be some type of service where you would have someone with just a regular driver's license to provide that transport.
And the only other question I have is but I'll defer this, but you talked about the tablet program where students log in, and there's a lot of data now being put on that bus in the wireless sphere. I just would want to make sure that security issues are tight, because that could be a vulnerability.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
All right,
We have another round, or what?
yeah, I'm gonna ask my questions first.
Oh, of course.
Again, I'm not gonna echo, thank you for, all the work. I can honestly say, and I know you get a lot from my district, which, goes to we start in the morning going to 17 schools, which hopefully, if done right, we are trying to do neighborhood schools so that the buses aren't all over the place. As we move through the day, we move from 17 to 8 to 5, and progressively gets longer, or I can at least speak to many of the students in my district. So I think that's something as we move forward, and I know that this board probably next year will be looking at the R word, whichever one you would like to use, redistrict, reassign, whatever word you want to use, that those decisions have major impacts on transportation. And I'm just, again, I will not be, how we can get maybe that analysis done as those decisions potentially may be required in the future, is making sure that there's a real input from transportation. I know how much it feels, and we love to hear, we'll make it work. But I do think the board or any of us needs to hear, we can make it work, but here's how it would work better. So I'm just throwing that out as we move into, well, some will move into looking at that issue. I think that's something that's very important. I would say, one thing that I have gotten from some parents is it being unclear when either they get the phone call of which child it might be addressing if they have multiple students. I'm just going to open it that way and let you
So-
respond.
That was a way to try to understand. There were some instances last week where we did not think we would have anybody to cover those unassigned runs. And so as a precautionary measure, that's what that call was for. But I am very happy to report by Monday morning, 6:30, all of those unassigned runs were assigned to drivers. And we sent out another call to cancel that. So we were able to do that. And so that started the day just fine. And hopefully I will not have to even think about sending any calls like that again.
Understood. That was just one that came. And then I have long been not just a district, but even not just where I live, but in schools that both my girls attended, double runs. And I remember every year asking how many there were. And I remember when we were like appalled when there were 27 or something. I know that the number, you may share it, you don't have to. Is our goal, though, to eliminate double runs as time goes through? And I know that seems like maybe a naive question, but having been in schools where my children attended, that we couldn't eliminate them. There was not a way, and I'm not, so is the goal with staffing, because when I went and looked back at the 2019 numbers, the FTEs for bus drivers were 214 point something. I don't want any point bus drivers, I want a full bus driver, but we had asked, I know during the budget, do we need more drivers? And maybe that, I don't know if that is driven by, do we want to eliminate double runs as a goal? And does that need more drivers? So that's just a dialogue I'd like to think about, but I'd be open for your response.
I believe that for transportation, and you mentioned about the impact and the opinions on any scheduling that may be brought up with the redistricting or anything of that nature, we want to be able to have some set parameters to provide with instruction, and anyone else that has the input about changes, here's what we can do. To kind of give you here the nuts and bolts about it. If you decide to extend the day, or you want to move or implement a program and you want to move kids around, okay, here's what we can do for optimal efficiency from that standpoint, because we want to be able to transport as many kids as possible on the bus by their capacity as much as possible. So when we think about those programs outside of the mainstream, we want to be able to provide you with the parameters so you already will have. Because it does. Time and distance is a factor in this county. So if you have a program that you want kids to attend in the southern end, but you want kids from the northern end, that's a big factor, especially if you're using Route 1 or any other roads. So you have to consider that travel time in between to establish that. So it's simple things like that. We can have that conversation and work out a common solution for that.
I'll probably have much more on that later, but I will leave it there. All right, Ms. Young, or
No, I
anyone
think
else?
you started over there with Ms. Healy and Ms.
Anyone
Hollenbeck.
else with second round questions?
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
I'll go. I know we just talked about benefits, more benefits, but Dr. Chase mentioned these bus attendants, and it costs money, right? And I think I asked this question. I'm only going to ask questions that I think I didn't hear, no recommendations that I didn't hear. But you know, I'm about solutions, and they're innovatives. You could take them or you could leave them. No emails. So the bus attendants, I think all of the bus attendants would have a license that they could drive, or they don't?
No. Not
So
all.
the bus attendants, would we be able to, if they want to drive, get them a license so that when we are behind or we need bus drivers, they could drive? Have we thought about it that
Well,
way?
It's possible. I mean, right now, we do have a program where we train monitors who desire to be their CDL, to get their CDL. But the way we are right now, as soon
Of
as they
course.
finish, we put them on a bus.
Of course,
They're
of
not,
course.
no one's on a standby nature.
Okay.
From that standpoint.
And then I will let that benefits and how you pay them differently or not to you all to decide. If you all are trying to recruit, that's something to think about, right? So, I don't know if this question was asked already. Are all, it sounded like you said that all the routes are covered now? Double, triple, 4 runs, super women and men out there, from what I understand?
Yes.
Okay, so if all of them are covered, and the app that you have, the app that you currently have is, you replaced the previous one you had, right? So you can't go back to the previous one you had. This app that you have right now is what you're using.
Yes.
And evidently, it sounds like the substitute runs is not correct in terms of the time arrival or whatever, because you maneuvered it that you could actually put that
Understood.
that sub in.
Yeah.
So how are we communicating with the parents that, I know you said you're telling them they're on a sub bus, but are you also telling them that the time is not correct? Because they're watching that app.
Right. No, that is the area of concern and area we want to improve. So conditions with that app, if we are able to substitute one bus for one bus, it works perfectly fine. It will also work as long as there's no competing time. So there's a window of time for a school for the morning arrival and the afternoon dismissal. It's preset. So once the bus falls out of that preset time, you lose it. And so those are conditions. So if my first load is 45 minutes, that's usually, as an example, the window of time to read for a particular school. So that first load is 45 minutes. That bus has to come back for the second load. Well, now it's into that next school tier time. So that bus may not capture because it's expected to be in the next school tier. So those are just examples, and that's where we want to have this informational sheet to better clarify at this point in time, because the app is built on primarily a scenario, and it's the perfect ideal scenario. It doesn't really meet our reality from what we're trying to do or what we're having to do because of the shortage of drivers. So when we have to split a route into 2 buses or 3 buses, we can't track it. And so whether or not we decide to tell parents today, because we're not going to be able to substitute your bus because we're having to split the route into 2 or more buses, it's not what our families want to hear, but we're telling them why we can't do that from that standpoint. It's informational. So in short, we cannot update the times if we have to substitute buses outside of the scheme that is recommended.
Can we communicate to them that that's happening?
Yes, that
Okay.
was the reason for the informational sheet that we want to develop and share with
Okay.
our families.
And the other question is not for you, but, or the comment is not for you, it's probably for Dr. Jones in terms of the help for these students that are missing every day. They're missing half an hour, 45 minutes. How are we planning on helping them outside of what you're saying about, synchronous? They're behind a week. They're panicking, anxiety. How are we helping them? Like, are we, in terms of, they're not late, I understand that, help with the work, and some kind of assistance.
So teachers are doing that individually with those students. I mean, that's what we
Okay.
expect teachers to do. As I mentioned, if we do the synchronous, it would be short-term until it wouldn't be a long-term solution, it'd be short-term until we have enough bus drivers that our routes are fixed. So it's never, that kind of assistance is never intended to be a long-term strategy.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
And then finally, those students are not penalized for being late, because we're responsible for that.
I wouldn't think so. You have a line outside your door. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Healy, that's all.
I just want to make sure I understand. So if a bus is beyond the time that school starts, we're not going to be able to track it in the app, is that correct?
For that particular school, you may not.
Okay. But what if a bus is beyond the time it should be at school? Are we going to be able to track it?
You may not.
So we need to do something about that app. That app does not meet our needs.
I totally agree.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because that assumes a perfect world that every bus is on time, even, I don't remember a time when that was ever the case. So, all right, so we
Yes.
have, who do we have working on this app? Do we have consultants? Are we doing it in-house, or,
Yeah.
you know,
We're
what
working-
are we doing to fix
Right.
the problems with the
So the first
app?
thing, we'd go back to the vendor and ensure
That's right now.
the capabilities, the full capabilities of it. And if that is not happening, then we are looking to explore to find vendors that can provide the type of parameters that we need. Because we have to be innovative on how we do this, and we need a system that can handle our needs and how we assign our buses and chop our runs to make sure we get kids to school on time. So it's something, this is probably my third parent app that I've experienced with, and by far this is the same. Every app primarily does this. That's their selling point, but you have to talk to them what they sell is in a perfect world. It never meets our reality in that standpoint. So that's the choice or not the choice, but the goal is to find a tool that's going to meet our reality.
And do we have any estimated time that we're going to be able to achieve this goal?
I'm hoping to have a solution by December is my goal, to have something to present to Mr. Fulmer, and then we can push from there.
Okay, well, if there's anything we can do to move that up, I'd suggest we do it. If we need to get people from the outside or, you know, wherever. I mean, this is not something I would expect the transportation people to have the expertise to be, you know, making adjustments in the app. But certainly the vendor that sold it to us, you know, should be,
Yep.
you know, anxious to
To
keep
come
us
in.
as satisfied customers, I
Totally
would think.
agree.
My other comment is more for the board. I heard, you know, a suggestion about an advisory, transportation advisory task force, advisory committee, and that's certainly something we probably should have thought of a long time ago. But I also would like to look at a single-purpose task force. Think about it, not for today, not for tomorrow, maybe not even next month, but looking for long-term solutions that would be more than just the school staff. We had a student driver task force set up many years ago, and
Mr.
it was
Rhodes.
set up, actually, I think the supervisors initiated it.
Mike Rhodes was the,
And, yeah, you know, it involved the board of supervisors, it involved the schools, it involved the sheriff's office, you know, involved VDOT, it involved the community. You know, probably most importantly is the community. Because the only bright light that I have had over this past 9 days is suggestions coming in from our community. It's amazing, you know, how many ideas are out there that I certainly never would have thought of, and they may work, and you know, if or we can use parts of them or whatever, but we would not be able to reap the benefit of this wealth of knowledge without putting it all together. So that's something I would like us to consider long-term. You know, not territorial, not, you know, schools are going to be in charge or somebody else is going to be charged, but sort of non-denominational task force that is going to be looking for ways we can improve, our offering of transportation. And this is not a reflection on the transportation, this is just the fact, there are things to do. I mean, I got an email that said, can you put in a sidewalk at North from the tennis courts to the front door? I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of that? We've got all these 3 Rs, but if kids are walking, they shouldn't be walking on between the grass and the road, or just all kinds of suggestions coming in. And our employees certainly have lots of suggestions. So I'd like us to think about that, and I'd like to set as a goal to do it sometime before the end of this year, when we lose, some of our members who have chosen, not to stick it out. But I would like to think about that, and have some suggestions, and, what can we do to help Stafford County Public Schools, our parents and our community.
So, Ms. Healy, just in terms of the sidewalk, we did have VDOT, Mr. Dutenheffer and I, we discussed that, and with the developer, the car wash and everything, and so that is something that is being considered. So it's not like we didn't discuss it. It's not there yet, but in the future, soon to come.
Right, but we need more than just discussion
of
and
course.
consideration. We need to have
It's coming,
some
yeah, I
plans.
mean, it's something that is discussed to be done. Yep.
Any other question? Yes, Dr. Chase, I thought so,
Yeah.
but then
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
So I two things. I'm going to piggyback off of Ms. Healy about this app. Call me old school, there was no app to track where my kid was on the bus. If the app isn't providing anything, maybe we shouldn't have the app, because it's another example of us over-promising, and people get really annoyed when they're promised that this is going to show them where their kid is, and it actually isn't showing them that. And, I get back to what are frills and what are necessities for educating children. And I'll tell you, software developers, I think, make a lot of money. They're not cheap. And so it's just a question. I mean, if what you're telling me is correct, that it really isn't providing the information it's purported to provide, then maybe we shouldn't have it. But if it is providing something, then that makes sense. So that's just my editorial comment. Another question I have, one of the things that's great about being on a board like this is we all bring different experiences, different perspectives. For me, and this is really a question for Ms. Neely, for me, the main driver for flipping this schedule was I looked at last year, and for me, as somebody who's taught developmental psychology, I have an understanding of language development and literacy, there being kind of a critical window in which to achieve those skills. And I think we're all aware that last year, with the pandemic, many of our students were very concerned, we'll find out soon, but there's a lot of concern that that window is shrinking for some of those students. So my question is, has this transportation change, this schedule change? Do we have a sense yet whether we're getting the amount of instructional time that this change, we were told that this change would provide for those elementary school students?
Yeah, and I think that, a week and 2 days into this, certainly that is our hope, that we would prioritize elementary. But it is early, and we do still have our second shift elementary schools in particular that are also delayed. So I just would say we don't want to forget that. We're getting better, but we still have some kinks to work out there. So I don't think we have a true sense of that right now, but certainly as we move forward and we make improvements, that's what we would anticipate.
So you'll get back to us?
Absolutely.
All right, great.
Let me just make one comment. When we did this in May, and we talked about this, I did make this, I went back and looked, and we said we would get a quarterly sort of update, so, on what the impacts, how things were working. And we said quarterly, I think at the time, so we can figure out when that quarterly is, but to your point, so. Ms. Randall, go ahead, sorry. My comment was right with
Yep.
that one, so.
Okay, so I wanted to know, sorry, Chris. Can I ask you a question? Sorry. You had mentioned something in our FAB meeting about proposing paras to be drivers. Has that happened, or has people or has that not been?
No, it did. We sent out and by we, I mean, actually,
Okay.
Mr. Burnett's office sent out a survey targeting those groups of employees.
Coaches and paras.
Yeah, mainly paras and coaches, asking, kind of gauging their interest on, would they be willing to get their CDL and then provide assistance, whether it's, we can basically put a bus at their school location. So I'm an Anthony Burns
Right.
paraprofessional. We can have a bus there or pick a
Okay.
school that has a good parking lot for
Right.
buses. They come in the morning, they actually take that, they go do a run, they come back, they're a para for the day. Maybe they then run those same kids home in the afternoon. Well, that eliminates 2 routes for us.
Right.
So it's a great opportunity.
Right.
Doing the same with coaches that then can help us cover those, special activity runs for
Right.
sports or.
Okay. I
or
just
anything.
didn't know, had it gone out yet, and, all right.
Yeah, it has gone out.
Okay, so the other thing is, when we have these kids coming in late to the middle and high schools, can we be assured that they are actually fed as they come in? Because I've not seen but just a couple. I just want to make sure, since some of them are like an hour or more coming, or 45 minutes or whatever, coming into their school, that someone can make sure that they're afforded their breakfast. Thanks, I appreciate that. And then also, Carrie, I wanted to ask about the elementary. So I think the year prior to COVID or coming into COVID, wasn't there just 4 elementary schools, I think in the center, that were kind of doing the similar split? There was only 2 elementaries? Okay, and so is it possible for us, once we get more drivers, just throwing this out there, is it possible for us to maybe move more elementary schools to the earlier shift and less to the second, instead of splitting the county? I don't know how that worked, scenario
The
worked
reason
as
for
like a
that.
pilot, but I'm just wondering as we get more drivers, is it possible to shift more elementary schools to the earlier start time so we can work in the middle and high?
Yeah, great point. We're actually kind of looking at that now to see if it even makes sense now.
Oh.
We need a few drivers probably to make it work, but it wouldn't be 3 or 4 elementary schools because that defeats the purpose. Right now, it's, I think, a split of 9 and 8. I forget which, 8, 9, or 9 or 8. And so we're looking at maybe moving one of them to the earlier shift, and then that would get them in early, get them on time, and then that would free up that maybe to get to the middle school
Middle
route
school.
a little bit earlier, or to help on that second shift elementary school. So as we consolidate these routes and get better numbers, we're looking at that as well.
Mr. Fulmer and Mr. Baldwin, before you all even touch those 2 schools, Park Ridge and Winding Creek, make sure you talk to the principals and some of the parents, because we did that for a reason. Okay? Those alternate, because we did that for a reason.
Sure. Yeah.
The other thing, while I was talking about the app and all the stuff, Mr. J back there knows about it. With the background of technology, you could turn some of those features off in the meanwhile, because I'm sure you're using some of it internally. So the ones that are externally, you may want to look at turning those off and see if that works, and then send communication out to the parents a different way.
Can I finish?
Thank you.
Okay, I had one more thing that I wanted to add, was how many buses, you did tell me, and I'm a flight brain, sorry. How many buses do we have air conditioning on total right now? And are we targeting or looking to add air conditioning to any more of our buses, or are they too old to be doing that?
They're too old. So we are developing a replacement cycle for school buses. So as they reach a certain number of years, a certain number of mileage, we're transitioning them out. And so that's kind of what we've done, I think, with some year-end money now, And I think we have a proposal for some more school buses that will automatically come with air conditioning and some other features.
All right, any other questions? I have two, but okay. Mine are hopefully fairly short. Since we're talking about sort of checking out whether an app or something works, again, please know, I never come from the technology angle. I come from I just want it to work when I turn it on. So I will say, I know we were talking about some of these tablets and GPS. I would really like for us to then say to the developer, I want you to take it around in Stafford County. I'm sure Ms. Warner has some spots down in Widewater. We'd like to see if you could get any reception. I can give you some places where I would love for you to drive the bus and see if you can get reception. With some of these features and things that
Yes.
many things look good on paper.
Right.
Stafford is unique, as you have recently
learning.
learned. We have lots of things. Any of those kinds of things, let's try it on our own before we purchase significantly, because some things may work and sometimes they may not. The only final thing I would add is with regard to what I was just talking about with the quarterly update. I know, and I look at, the educational chiefs, I certainly want that to be part of that update on how the flip works. But I will say there's another part of that I also would like to make sure that we're talking about is with our mechanics, our safety checks. How is that working? And I'm not asking for a question, but how are we able to get in the sufficient time? I know right now we also have cleaning, but there's a lot of safety stuff that
Yes.
goes on. How has everything been impacted there? Like I said, it doesn't have to be, but I'm just trying to let everybody know that will be an additional part of some of my questions would be at a quarterly update. Education is certainly, but also safety and how we're meeting those needs in our fleet services.
So just real quick, our school buses have to do a 45-day inspection. And the fleet director, Mr. Jeter, has already presented a calendar of dates when buses are due. So they roughly do, I think, from 4 to 6 buses a day. And that is on a rotating scale throughout the school year. He just wrapped up the summer maintenance, which is a more in-depth inspection of the 45-day. Those guys worked very hard because they were pushing 6 or 7 buses out a day in this shortened time period from the time school ended until we started up. So he has shared that with us, and we maintain it. Our drivers know when to bring the bus in. If they can get it in earlier, they will. So that is an ongoing process because that is a requirement. That's a mandate that we have to do that. And he's also recommending he's been able to see any places where we can make some improvements, get a bigger bang for lesser value. From that standpoint, he's done that. And so I think as far as the safety of our buses is doing very well.
And Mr. Fulmer, in August of 2019, if we can all remember, you and at the time, Mr. Sudduth presented a overview of our buses, our fleet, how old, all of those things. I am not asking for that tonight. You all have plenty. But I do think that that is an important document to also continue to share with our community of, these are the kind of buses. I still have I never throw anything out, found it, but under bus, because I keep files on everything. But it was a very interesting overview of Stafford County and our bus fleet, aging, just going into what we have all been talking about. We have a lot of needs, we have a lot of stuff, but we have a lot of stuff that's getting older. And I know we have talked for years about trying to get cyclical bus replacement as part of 3Rs and capital improvement. So this may be another opportunity to revisit that. So, all right. All right, seeing no others, thank you all for coming tonight. Now, Mr. Fulmer, are you and Mr. Burnett presenting the next one, or is Fab, or how, I don't know who's taking the lead on this one, I apologize.
I'm just going to make a quick statement. To Ms. Haley's point about a task force, I think that's an excellent idea. We're going to start with, I think Ms. Randall has put on the agenda for the 24th. We are going to set up a transportation committee, advisory committee like we have for other committees. We've already reached out to a number of parents who've presented ideas to us to be on it. and to start addressing some of these transportation issues in the community. But I do agree that some of this is a problem where we need VDOT and others to look at it. The FAB did talk about a number of things to try to improve, recruit bus drivers. Mr. Fulmer will be presenting on a new bonus structure. The hourly rate, we're going to be updating the hourly rate. Recommending an hourly rate, which I think we will also be voting on later. Change the pay scale for our drivers to a biweekly, which would help them, and continue to work with the DMV to get the training through, because we've increased, I think the times have been improved, but I think there's maybe still some areas of improvement to try to get our drivers through the CDL training. And the other thing is, we've talked about recognizing our existing drivers who've worked so hard over the last 9 days. Maybe they've put in, I don't know, a month over the last 9 days. Anyway, Mr. Fulmer.
All right, so I have several things I want to go over. You provided you a hard copy of this memo. It's probably easier if you follow along there. You're more than welcome to follow along on the screen as well. What we're proposing is adjusting the pay scale, and I'm going to get into that second, actually, even though it's first on here, because that's a separate document, and that's where there's probably a lot more discussion. So I'm going to jump actually to the proposed signing bonus that we're discussing. And I want to let you know that we met with a few of our drivers earlier today, some of our leads, Mr. Baldwin, and then one of our drivers, experienced drivers, just so they knew what was coming, and I didn't want to do anything to offend them and make sure that they were on board with the changes we were making. And they had some other ideas that we'll continue to explore, but they were fully supportive of these options that we're proposing to you tonight. So first of all, we started it this past summer, a $1,000 signing bonus to any new driver that comes to us in order to try to attract drivers. We want to maintain that $1,000, but also offer a $3,000 bonus, which is included, so not $4,000, but $3,000 total if a driver comes to us already with their CDL and their bus driver designation. So if we can attract an experienced bus driver, we want to offer them a $3,000 signing bonus. And for both of those bonuses, it would split between 50% when they finish their training or their first 30 days if they do have a CDL, and then 30 and 60 respectively for a non-CDL and a CDL license. So the drivers we spoke to really felt that would be huge. We also are going to keep we started a referral program with our existing drivers and staff that we actually gave them little name cards, business cards that identify them, and they hand them out to a prospective driver that they're recruiting. And so when that new driver comes in, signs up, they would provide that with us so we know that, hey, Laura recommended me to come in and to interview or apply for this position. And that's been helpful. I already mentioned we have a couple of drivers that are referring folks and getting experienced drivers. So we know that right now we need drivers quickly. So when we bring a driver in, it's a 5 or 6 week process to get them trained, know all of our protocols before they're on the road. So we really want to attract experienced drivers. And we know we're not going to find 40 or 50 experienced drivers that are willing to come to Stafford tomorrow. But so we would still offer that $1,000, and we're still, anybody's listening, we're still accepting any application, CDL or not. Our ad will always say no CDL required, because we're going to put you through that training. We're going to pay to put you through that training. But that $3,000 bonus we really think is going to be a great incentive to attract drivers with that CDL already. And then before I jump to the scale, and I want to mention that we're going to retroactively, so if we hired a driver with a CDL, since we put this into place over the summer, we're going to go back and retroactively apply that full $3,000 bonus to the $1,000 bonus they already would have received, or the $2,000 difference, to clarify. It is not just drivers that are that we're having trouble filling. There's an internal equity issue as soon as we adjust our drivers significantly, which I'm going to show you. But we have route coordinators, we have our lead drivers, which really, lead drivers is a bad example because we're going to adjust our lead drivers when we adjust our regular drivers, because our lead drivers, as I've already mentioned, are our drivers and some of our best drivers that are willing to really step up and go that extra mile. So they're going to be adjusted when we adjust our regular drivers. They're right now one tier, like one scale higher than our regular drivers, and we're looking at analyzing that going forward too, because believe it or not many drivers want to take on the extra duties and responsibilities of the paperwork and dealing with the issue track and going through that while they're still expected to drive every day because we don't have enough drivers. So hopefully that can change in the future. But we're also looking at adjusting the tier structure for our lead drivers. I want to mention that we need to look at our fleet technicians. That's been an area that we've had a lot of feedback from in the past. They were included in our service scale enhancement that we did this past year, but that really just targeted, let's give people credit for their years of experience. So it didn't look at where they were placed on our uniform scale overall. So knowing that we're doing these adjustments for drivers, we need to go back and now look at some of these other areas and what equity issues we have to clean up. Our bus drivers, they were placed on the uniform scale as all of our service scale employees were. We are actually proposing to take them off of that uniform scale, which is like a pay band of $17.67 up to, $33 is roughly the top of our scale now per hour. And we want to put them back on a step scale where we can say, hey, 1 year of service, you're here, 5 years of service, you're here. We were kind of doing that behind the scenes anyways because of the uniqueness of bus drivers. So at this point, we just want to develop that scale, which I'm going to provide you tonight, and then going forward in the budgets, we're going to show that. There's still no guarantee that you're going to move up a step every year. We can't make that guarantee, but it is very clear that we need to make sure that we differentiate between our experienced drivers and our new drivers, and that we show that a new driver is at X and an experienced driver with this many years is at Y. If we can get these changes pushed through for the drivers, those will go into effect on the October 1st payroll. If we can, then are going to analyze these other positions that I've mentioned, and then those will go effect on the November 1st payroll. So any questions on that before I jump into the actual changes in the scale proposed?
My question is in reference to, are we planning on implementing this without any amendments, or like, is this set? This is it, what you're asking for? Because I'm looking at benefits. I was thinking about benefits.
Yeah, so there's still other areas that we need to explore, and that's what, when we get this committee together with drivers, we can look at some of these other areas. Maybe it's not 6.5 is what we consider a full-time driver. We already offer health insurance, and as I've already mentioned, but maybe we need to tweak when that is and do a comparison of other localities as well.
And then I think this is not a long-term issue, hopefully not, but those that are doing 4 to 8 runs, I know I asked that if they're getting paid, and you said yes, but how? Are they being compensated for those runs? Just not with pay, but I don't know, is it double pay? I don't want to go into specifics, but that's not maintainable for a long run. So I'm wondering if you're giving these, these bonuses, and then they're driving for the 8 runs, what are you doing there for them?
Yeah, so any driver that goes over their contracted hours is going to be paid hour for hour, and then if they go over 40 hours, it would be a time and a half.
Okay. Okay.
Wave?
What is the cost of this program if it were approved as it's presented?
So including the new pay scale, which I'll share with you, is about, annual-wise, is about $1.5 million. The signing bonuses, I'm not concerned about. Relatively, they're a small amount compared to all the vacancies we have and the savings that we have. So it's really and because especially if we bring in an experienced CDL driver, we would have paid them in training, the cost of going through the training. So it starts to offset each other. But the cost to do the pay scale adjustments, with leaving a little bit of room for the other adjustments we need to do for the positions listed at the bottom, is about $1.5 million. So.
Is this COVID? Are
No.
you taking it out of COVID for the next 2 years, or what?
It will not. So let me show you the scale and kind of the comparison that we're looking at, and then we can get into potential funding. So because I know this was small, I definitely printed this out for you to take a look at, so you would have a hard copy. In blue here, we have our current what would be our step scales for our current drivers at one-to-one experience. The yellow is our proposed, green just shows the differences between those two, and on the far right, in the, it shows a little bit differently up there, it's kind of like a pinkish red color, is our Prince William hourly rates for drivers, and then the Spotsylvania hourly rate drivers. So in the past, we would have come to you and said, hey, Prince William's paying $18.16, let's pay $18.25 or whatever. That has not gotten us where we need to be. So we are proposing Prince William's at $21.34, Spotsy's at $18.16. We want to leapfrog everybody and get a starting pay of $22 even, so that we can actually attract drivers from our most competitive divisions. We know we have drivers that live in Stafford that are driving in Spotsy, driving in Fairfax, and driving in Prince William, I already mentioned that, Prince William, Spotsy, and Fairfax. So those are who we want to attract. If we have experienced CDL drivers out there that are living in Stafford, we want to make them have that conscious decision that I'm not going to drive in Stafford, and it's not going to be because of the money or the benefits. We know actually with the 6.5 is we're good there. Typically, what we contract for, maybe some improvements there, and that's where talking to the bus drivers will help. One of the things we're also looking on, not to get off topic from this, is how we can expedite our onboarding process, not only for CDL, but for non-CDL. And let's contract them right away instead of just saying, hey, we're going to keep you hourly for 30 days until we place you on a route. We know we have the vacancy, we know we have the need, so we need to contract them as quickly as possible so that drivers aren't concerned about coming to Stafford and saying, hey, I can't go 30 or 60 days with health insurance, or that uncertainty of that contract time. So we are looking at all our ways of expediting that process and getting them onboarded and contracted right away. So what we did is selected $22 so that we were above Prince William and Spotsylvania, and then went with a 2.25. It ranges a little bit, if you see here in the yellow right in the middle of the screen, and that's just because of rounding. A penny here actually can make a difference when you get out in that many decimal points. So it's supposed to be 2.25% increase all the way down, and we replace them at a 1-to-1. So this changes our scale from a $17.67 up to approximately $33 an hour. It now takes it from the $22 an hour up to $45.88 an hour. So a very big increase. You can see the dollars per hour and the percentage that we'll see from the top to the bottom as a new driver or as an experienced driver. And I will echo again, we're going to offer 1-to-1. So it's how all of our drivers are now, is they're placed at a 1-to-1. So if we can get a driver with 25 years of experience, we're going to pay them like they have 25 years of experience, because there's no reason we should be turning drivers away right now or providing a barrier for them to want to come to Stafford County when they could stay in. Or go ahead.
Are we going to retroactively, any bus drivers we've hired, are we going to upgrade them to 1-to-1, or have we already done that?
Yes, that's been done, yeah. When we did the pay scale adjustment this past year, when we started giving people years of credit, it was actually done back in 2019 when we did the service scale adjustments. Bus drivers were placed on a similar scale, but it was a one-time placement so that we could give our experienced drivers credit for all those years. And so we've stuck with that. And now formalizing it and actually putting that written step scale system in place so that it's very clear that when a driver is looking at Stafford, they can look and say, hey, I know I've got 30 years, this is where I'm going to be, or 15 years or 12 years.
Mr. Fulmer, if a driver comes to you that is has 18 to 33 to 32 years experience, why would they want to drive in Stafford?
So one, with these changes on our scale, we make it much more competitive. We are far above Spotsylvania, and all the way up until 15 years, I believe it was, is we're kind of either above or dead even. That's where Prince William starts to pass us, because their percentages, like all their scales, grows really rapidly, and it's hard to keep up with. So we're targeting the ones that live around us. We know there are drivers that live here and that work in other divisions, so we want them to make that decision of, I live in Stafford, but I'm going to drive farther away to make less money, or we're making the gap so small that it's not worth driving to Prince William or Fauquier or Fairfax.
Because the only reason why I'm mentioning that is because I'm not saying that the the retirees are more, the ones that are going to come for these jobs, but I'm just looking at 17 and up, and it's opposite of what Prince William is offering. So I was just commenting on that. So-
Yeah, we definitely don't keep up with Prince William there, and so we start to trail off there at the most experience, but it is still a considerable increase and an attractive rate for other experienced drivers. I want to mention, because it was cut off there at the bottom, just because it would have shrunk it down more, but Spotsylvania's scale actually goes beyond step 33. We're proposing that we stop at 33, and that be our top of the scale. For the same reason that we're trying to get there with our teacher scale, is we don't want a scale that goes up to 40. We want to show where that top of the scale is, and 33 was our target with the teacher scale, and so we're targeting the same with our bus drivers.
Mr. Fulmer, where are we getting this $1.5 million from?
Yeah, so, good question, and that's the big question, right? So we know we have savings this year, just from vacancies, and we're gonna continue to have them, whether it is,
How do we know that?
well, because we know our vacancies exceed what we budgeted, whether that's licensed vacancies or our service scale vacancies, including the bus driver. I'm not saying, we budget roughly $3 million in budgeted vacancy savings and turnover of salary lapse and vacancy savings every year. And for the past several years, we've been more in the 4.5, 5.5. Last year was the anomaly because it was a COVID year, and so there were some positions that we left more vacant. So actually, that number rose, but I reported that in a prior report to the board. But what I want to propose is that we go to, I've talked to the county staff, Dr. Kisner has talked to the county administrator to give him a heads up. We want to go to the Board of Supervisors. We have carryover funds. We've accumulated it from the past couple of years because of COVID year in 2020 and last year, 2021. We've accumulated a schools fund balance on the county side. We don't get to carry over those funds automatically, as most board members know. It goes back to the county, and they set it in a separate reserve. So I want to request from the Board of Supervisors that we appropriate that in this year of $1.5 million. It's still going to be our responsibility to budget it going forward, because it's going to basically be a one-time cost to us this year that we take those funds from the capital reserve fund, and then going forward, we would budget it and identify it in the FY23 budget.
Dr. Chase?
So are we saying, if we were to vote on this tonight, we would be voting contingent on the Board of Supervisors approving this money, us being allowed to use this money?
So, yes and no. So it's kind of up for discussion to see what you're comfortable with. I would prefer not to delay it any more than we can. If we're going to have it effective on the October 1st payroll, we really need to act sooner than later, knowing that it's going to be several weeks before we can get to the Board of Supervisors, that we go ahead and start moving in that process. We approve it, and it's up to me to make sure that I know, based on the vacancy savings that we have in licensed staff and our bus drivers, we've already accumulated probably a couple $100,000 in bus driver vacancy savings just from the point of when we can fill all these positions. That cuts into our deficit. That I want to move forward now, so put that burden on making sure I track during the year and I can report back to you. In the meantime, so let's start moving forward, and we'll still go to the Board of Supervisors and request those funds as needed for FY22.
Okay.
So I make a motion.
Wait, I haven't finished.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And unfortunately, my phone just decided to make a lot of racket, so let me turn that off. There we go. Okay, so this means that when we put together our budget for next year, we will already have these extra funds spent. What does 1.5 million translate in terms of a salary, percent salary for staff?
Yeah, let me think for a minute. It's usually around 2.5 million for every 1% that we do, 2.2, 2.3 million, but I haven't calculated that for this year, and the prior year is about 2.3 for every 1%.
So in some ways, we're kind of gambling on the idea that the folks across the street, the state will give us enough money to offset the fact that we're spending 1.5 million now on this. Is that right? I mean,
Yes.
And I've certainly heard from supervisors that they're very concerned about this. They're hearing from their constituents, but will they remember that come March and April of next year? That's rhetorical.
Yeah.
Just quickly, so the 1.5 million extra is on top of the 2.5 million extra that we've had to put in for the salary adjustments and everything that we already put into the budget from last year.
Yeah, so those were put into already built into the budget. It impacted bus drivers very slightly because they had already seen the 2019 impact, but because the adjustment was a little bit greater than what they saw in 19, there were still some drivers impacted by that. But that was already budgeted and identified for those staff. Yes, ma'am. But that was already built into our base, so it's not a new increase next year. That was built into the FY22 base.
Ms. Healy?
I'm going to be supporting this because we need to do something drastic. But I'm concerned about our other service employees. I mean, we have a lot of critical positions. You look in our offices, you go into the schools, and the staff in those offices are generally understaffed, underpaid, and overworked. So we finally got when we get our pairs up to, close to the bottom of the competition scale. There's a lot of other staff that we need to think about. And I don't want to lose sight of that while we're dealing with this crisis. Because this school system is only as good as our collective staff. I mean, we start with the focus on the teachers because, they're the ones on the line, in the classrooms, with the students. And certainly they are incredibly important and valued employees. But, the paras that are in the classroom, the cafeteria folks, that feed everybody, the administrative staff, that's all part of this whole education that we're providing. So I would ask the FAB to be looking at that, because over the years we've had many reports, and our service people have always been, if not at the bottom of the comps below that. So like I said, I'm going to support the bus drivers because they've always, had the issue as well. But if we're going to be able to do something like this for the bus drivers, we need to be addressing, and I'm not talking about years from now, we need to be looking at it for the next budget, what we're going to do for our other support staff.
Quick question. With respect to the bonuses for the $1,000 or the $3,000, are we going to require, is there going to be an expectation of time served to make that so they don't have to pay it back? We're doing 6 months, we're doing a year, are we silent on that topic at all, or what's going on?
So in the past with signing bonuses like these, and Mr. Burnett is more than welcome to jump up here too, because he can speak better to it, but we haven't had, that clawback provision because it's, not necessarily always effective. Honestly, we can get a bus driver for 3 or 4 months, we're going to be happy with that. We are having the requirement of they have to, if they're a non-CDL, they need to finish their training. When they finish their training, they'll get half of that, so they'll get $500. And then after 30 days of driving with us, they'll get the other half. And, at that point, we've kind of hooked them in and have them. I've talked to some outside folks that even when they get CDL licenses, it's, most like trucking companies or other ones, they really want to see for insurance costs, they want to see somebody with an experience. So they're typically not leaving right away, but yeah, we could lose a driver in 6 months or a year after they've gotten their CDL. You know, and then for our, and I apologize, got to update it on the memo because we made some changes to this, but our CDL license ones that we retain, or attract, that we're offering the $3,000 bonus for, it'll be 30 and 60 days. So we'll give half at the 30 days and then half at 60. I don't want to push it out any farther because that's taking that carrot and dangling it really far away.
Right.
If we want to attract someone, it really needs to have that immediate impact.
Sure, sure. Okay, great, thank you.
All right, any other questions of Mr. Fulmer or Mr. Burnett on this?
It's not a question, it's just a comment that we are a growing county, and we need to transport every year more and more kids. And so we need bus drivers. If we can't get the students to school, then teachers can't teach. Yes, I agree that the whole school system needs to be paid above and beyond what they're doing in the schools. But back in 2005, the budget was, the county's budget was 70% for the school system, and today, with this growing county, it's 55. So that's definitely going in the wrong direction, right? I'm sorry? 40. Oh, it's 40. No, I thought it was 55. I don't think it's 40. But either way, so I'm good there to giving the bus drivers, and probably for the FAB also to look at the rest of the staff like we did in the past to get them up to where Prince William is. Thank you.
Ms. Randall?
Chris, you mentioned in our meeting the other day, too, that there was going to be some efforts to make evening classes to be a little bit more attracting. Are we beginning those?
So, you know, once we get the additional drivers in, you know, so those evening and weekend classes are going to be great for the paraprofessionals that, you know, are working during the day. It also helps with attracting outside drivers because, you know, maybe they can do their training on their own or in the evenings while they're still working, maybe not in if they're getting their training, then they're not a CDL one. We want to get them right away, so we'll expedite them. But the ones we need to provide classes for, we're looking at nights and weekends, and so it might be that we need to revamp our training or bring in some additional trainers in order to facilitate that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Chase?
So in the FAB, you sort of mentioned that at the end of 2019, our salary was competitive with SPOTC, but in the interim, SPOTC adjusted their scale, and then we were not competitive anymore. I just want to encourage you all to keep an eye on that so that next year in August, we have an idea of whether we have to adjust things before the school year starts. So I just ask that y'all do that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, any other comments on this topic? All right, moving on to our last topic on our work session. This is of our review and discussion of the proposed superintendent leadership profile. I would like to compliment and thank Dr. Warner on a lot of her work on this document to make it a more, I would call it succinct, hopefully attractive for our next superintendent. I will ask if there are any major concerns. I'm sure there's a few things that we can always wordsmith, but I'm really hoping that we do capture the essence of what we are looking for in our new leader.
So the only question I have is, this is what we were given by the consultant. Is every one of these reflected in this? Do we have a red line that shows what was taken out?
The summary here.
Okay, so there was nothing that was deleted from this list?
They
What
may
was-
have been combined that were very similar, because some of these were pretty similar.
Repetition, so I took all the repetition out of what had been provided by BWP and sent this summary page to Ms. Hazard. And so everything, oh, sorry. I took the document from BWP and deleted duplicates and just summarized everything else. Everything else they had written is there.
Okay,
And then Ms. Hazard sent me a document. I sent her this, and Dr. Chase and I had actually discussed that this was an acceptable way to do it, but Ms. Hazard rewrote, and then I edited her document. So that's how we ended up with this.
okay, so was there, so this backside of that question is, was there anything added that wasn't initially in this one? And if so, can you point out which ones those are?
I can speak to
I can
the-
point to some of
Okay,
them
you
out.
go
I
ahead
mean,
and start
just from
back.
having read it. So this paragraph about, or this section about Stafford County Public Schools is Virginia's 8th largest school division, has ranked first or second, and all of that has been added. I don't know what else has been added.
That was pulled from our press release, so it came from a document about the school system. So it did come straight from those documents, so just
Okay,
where
then
that
that's
came
fine.
from.
I'm more concerned about the bullet points that are here versus the explanation.
Yeah, and I would say my concern is, we talked last time about we would do some tweaks, and so the summary looks like tweaks to me. This looks like a lot more. Also, it says the School Board of Stafford County has prepared the leadership profile, whereas this other one says the stakeholders, and then in the summary, it says the Stafford community. So that's changed a little bit. I would say my preference, based on what was said at the last meeting, would be to go with this, because this is closer to what came out of the community stuff. But we can certainly go with this.
Why do we have two?
Question.
We have
Just
two.
wanna know, just a
We have
question.
two because when I read the profile provided by BWP, I felt there were some redundancies in it, and I felt that there was an emphasis on some areas that I thought were less critical. And, for example, growth was hardly mentioned in BWP's profile.
this.
And I felt like that was an important thing, but critical race theory was mentioned like 3 times.
Can we
and I-
just pick one? I mean,
Can I add something? So one of the things I did was, I looked at BWP's leadership profile that was done, I think it was with Arlington, and I like the things that Liza restructured, and, I'm sorry, Dr. Warner, restructured in here. There are a couple things, that I think could be tweaked too still. But the one part that I did like about, just because I think it develops, it kind of goes with the different word groups that he gave us about like what came out, is I like having the bulleted breaks of characteristics that we are looking for. And so I'm kind of thinking if this can be divided into, because this is more the succinct wording that they originally gave us, but even to divide it into some of the words that came out.
The
that,
headings?
In the,
Are the headings?
yes,
Okay.
that came out in our, profile report that we received. That would be my suggestion. I do see that there's a lot more added into this, and I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I just feel like this kind of makes it very clear to who we are looking at to know the areas that we're trying to emphasize.
I guess.
So the
I-
summary with the headings.
Yeah, I just have a concern about, we're supposed to get this done pretty much today.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of work has been done by board members already, so I could go with either one. I just feel like we probably ought to make a decision tonight and not be asking people to do more. I mean, if you want to do it, please feel free, but I think it's a lot. And I'm not sure how much people actually read these things.
Is there a,
I have a question.
oh, yes, I'm sorry, Ms.
I'm just wondering where the line was drawn between the must and the should and the desires, and just doing a real rough count now, it looks like there's 4, if you count the expects as musts, then maybe 6 of those, and about 12 or so of, should or what we're seeking. No, am I looking at the right document?
Well, there are two.
The leadership profile and desired experience?
There was this one, which was a
There's a
That's a
summary.
summary. I'm not looking at, I assume that this leadership profile and experience, desired experience for the next superintendent, Stafford County Public Schools is what you're proposing be published. Is that correct? Am I looking at the wrong one?
I think it could be either one of these.
Oh, so you're saying it could be,
It could be either.
Right.
okay, well, I'm just curious, well, more than curious, but where we say, some say must, some say we seek, some say should. There's 2 that absolutely don't even have a subject and a verb. I mean, there's, out of all these, they're all sentences except for 2 of them. So where did that come from? Is that coming from the profile, the must and the should and the expectation or desire? Because whoever is going to be applying is going to be looking at this as to what we're looking for. So it is actually very important to let the applicants know, what it is. So
They should and shall.
is that something that was in the profile? I'm not talking about a will and a shall and a may. I'm talking about the actual words. Must be, must understand. I think I counted 4 must.
This is more similar to what was in.
Look,
Will be, will need to be. So how did that distinction come about?
I think that how I looked at it was we took all of those summaries, but I felt like this summary document for me did not tell me what is the person we're looking for. I felt like we needed to name them. I am fine to go with the summary. At this point, I don't care. However, I do think that, for me, these are the things that were listed. I don't know how many I know several of
about
us
4,
spent
yeah.
a lot of time reading that profile. I did. I read it cover to cover, read every comment. So I please know, I read it. I know that others have read it. So to me, it was trying to put our best foot forward to say to somebody, because I feel these are the things, and I believe that the board does own this. We may have a community profile, but this is the board saying, this is who I'm looking for. Who are we looking for? I felt that these headings gave more interest to a person than reading all these bullets, personally. But I am fine to go with the summary. I just know that it takes a lot of time to read through that 90 pages of stuff to get to this. And so I was trying to pull it out, me, I'm a summarizer, or I'm trying to be a summarizer, so that somebody can go, hey, I think I want to commit to the community. I want to be an instructional leader. I'm collaborative. I'm a planner, and I'm an effective communicator. I feel like that's what I wanted them to do. But I am not tied to it. For me, I feel like we are putting out a job description. And this more to me looked like a job description. Although it's a profile, it's still a job description to me. But for the time that we will take on this, the individuals and candidates who need to get theirs in is by September 1st. They would like to make sure they can see it. For the interest of time, I am fine with the summary. I think this is more effective, though, to tell you as a job description what I'm looking for. But
Well, I think, if I may, I think Ms. Healy brings up a good point, though, of we don't want it written in such a way that it turns people away. We may not find somebody who must, who has all of these things. And so if it's a little more open, so that somebody could look at this and be like, well, maybe I'm missing bullet number 5, I can't, but I think I got everything else, that they would still think about, that we would still consider them, but.
I don't know if that's what Ms. Healy was thinking. Were you
Well-
not thinking, sorry, I thought I heard you say that there were some places had must and others didn't.
Yeah,
So
that's
there,
four.
and then some were
4 to
moved.
6. If you say if you interpret expect to be must, then there's, I'm just did a rough count, but.
And then
you
they
know,
moved on the other sheet.
You know what, well, this summary, to me, I understand what you're saying, Ms. Hazard, and I
don't think that
would
That's what she said.
agree with that if in fact we had analyzed and discussed each of these and why we were putting must and why we were putting what we're seeking and, you know, what we say we expect, you know, all these different levels that we haven't had a chance as a board to talk about. And certainly, we're not gonna have time tonight, and I agree this needs to get done. So I'm not comfortable making these distinctions about somebody must have these things. They should have this, and we're seeking something else. And like I said, 2 of them don't even have anything. They don't have a subject and a verb. It's just a description. So,
Well, for me, you must be willing to make a long-term commitment. That's a must for me. So any candidate who's watching, that's a must for me.
right, but what candidate over the past 20 years that I've been involved in this, there has never been a candidate that did not make a long-term commitment. Now, whether that commitment is followed through is another issue. But I would not expect somebody to come and say, well, I'm just looking for, you know, this short term.
At this point, I'm not willing to
Period.
fight over the wills because there's a lot of stuff in here that we are expecting as well. But if everybody does not want to continue to discuss this, we're fine and we can adjourn and then bring it back.
No,
in
we're not
our-
bringing nothing back. We're doing what we
I'm
need to
good
do.
with this summary. I
Okay.
think,
Yeah, we're
I
doing
think
the
that it
summary.
gives the full picture. We're not gonna find a candidate that has absolutely everything here, but I don't want to preclude a candidate from applying because they might not have one of the musts.
So,
Just in my defense, I'm going to say, it does say who can demonstrate a combination of the following
Um,
qualities.
am I missing something? I don't see any must on the summary. I see must on this sheet.
Right.
What she's talking about.
Right.
Yeah,
This
yeah, I
is
will-
what
I
we're
will
looking
too.
for.
Yeah, so we're all saying the same thing, we're in agreement. We'll go with the summary.
Sounds good. Should we adjourn? I need 5 minutes.
Okay, sure.
All right, let's adjourn our work session and we'll be back. On or off? Okay, now I'm on. All right, I am going to call to order our special called meeting of August 17th of the Stafford County School Board. No one needs to participate electronically. Ms. Hall, can you do the roll call for our special called meeting?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Chase?
Here.
Ms. Hazard?
Here.
Ms. Healy?
Here.
Ms. Hellerback?
Here.
Ms. Randall?
Here.
Dr. Warner?
Here.
And Ms. Young?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
All right, is there an
Move to
approval for the
approve the
agenda?
agenda?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye. Oh, yes.
If we're gonna amend that language, we should do that.
Okay. I would ask that there be for the closed session, if you could hand me that we would be convening a closed meeting pursuant to the appropriate section to consider the appointment of an interim superintendent and interim associate superintendent. Is the board okay with that particular amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
You ready to vote? Okay. All those in favor of the amended agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have 2 action items on our agenda.
Motion to approve the pay scale and bonus structure is presented for the bus drivers.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? I believe we would be saying that the attachment, I'm sorry, I have up my wrong meeting. I just want to make sure what is attached is our correct.
The memo for the proposed compensation changes.
And the proposed bus driver
Bus
scale.
scale, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure they were
Yeah.
attached and they were as we discussed. All right, any comments from board members? I will make one quick one. I too will be supporting this motion this evening. I believe, as we have done in the past, we do meet times where we have critical needs because the transport of our students is critical. It starts off our day. However, as indicated by Ms. Healy and others, this is not only our only critical need area. It is our currently crisis critical need area, but I do believe, having heard about the teacher resignations over the last week and other things, that we may have additional crisis needs. However, right now, we do need to get our students safely to school. We have great bus drivers. I want to reward them as well. But I do want to reiterate what has been said. This is not the first time we will do it, and this will not probably be the only area that we will need to do it going forward. I hope our community embraces and understands the complexities of a school system and also teacher shortage, other areas of shortage. All of education may end up becoming a critical need area going forward. So with that, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item.
Motion to approval of a superintendent leadership profile?
Second.
Can we specify which one it is? Is it
Yes.
this? So, Ms. Randall, can you specify that in your motion?
Yes, I'm specifying the summary leadership profile.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Well, I'll just make another comment with that. This will then be submitted to BWP to be able to be included in their advertisement and further materials for any of the candidates who have submitted and those who may come in with the closure date of September 1st. That is the reason for this. All those, I will have them put on the bottom, adopted by the board or approved by the board with this date at the bottom.
Can we also
Can we also put that on our website so that it, potential candidates could have perhaps quicker access to it?
We'll put it in that tab.
Can it be included in the minutes or on the, for the meeting? I don't know how that, yeah.
It will be, but probably by the time those come out, we hopefully will have our candidates having their submissions. It'll go on the area of our superintendent tab. I'll make sure that Sandra includes it. All right. Any further? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, we have a closed session. Ms. Randall.
I move that the school board convene a closed meeting pursuant to Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711A1, to discuss and consider the appointment of an interim superintendent and an interim associate superintendent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We are in closed session. All right.
Oh, because we didn't open the other door.
Now you're ready.
I move that pursuant to Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia, the closed meeting of the School Board of Stafford County on August 17, 2021 be certified by adopting the following resolution. Now therefore be it resolved that the School Board of Stafford County hereby certifies, to the best of each other's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies. And two, only such business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board.
Ms. Hall, can you poll the board? Second, or somebody second?
Second.
Dr. Chase?
Agree.
Ms. Hazard?
Agree.
Ms. Healy?
Yes.
Ms. Hellerback?
Agreed.
Ms. Randall?
Agree.
Dr. Warner?
Agree.
And Ms. Young?
Yes.
Madam Chair, motion passes.
Thank you. Is there a motion coming out of closed session? I believe Dr. Warner?
Motion to approve the appointment of an interim, Dr. Stanley Jones as interim superintendent and Dr. Tom Nichols as interim assistant superintendent, effective 8/26.
Second.
Excuse me, you mean associate?
Associate superintendent, effective 8/20. Associate interim superintendent.
Second.
All right.
I'm sorry, ma'am, did you say what date effective? 26, thank you.
All right, I think it's been moved and seconded. And
Madam Chairman, can we just put for the record that the 25th is going to be Dr. Kisner's last day, you know, on site, we'll just say that. I just don't want somebody to think we're just
Arbitrarily picking a date.
arbitrarily setting the date of August 26th, but that's when we need you guys.
Who was the second, please?
I believe it was Ms. Young.
Thank you.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. We need you now, though, too. You can't wait till the 26th.